Do you love novels, but don't have time to read thousands of chapters? Imagine listening to your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, while driving, working, or relaxing. Here, you'll find premium audiobooks from Pocket FM, Audible, Webnovel, Wuxia, and more, all in one place. Every novel is a one-time payment, no subscriptions, no monthly fees, lifetime access. The full novel list and prices are in the description below. Once you choose a novel, just DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-fi, or Patreon, you get permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. And if the novel is ongoing, all future updates are included. Check the description, pick your story, and start listening today. Before we start the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Enjoy, and let's go.
301, Chapter 301. In a luxurious room shrouded in an oppressive, absolute darkness, a voice, cold and sharp as obsidian, cut through the silence. I seem to recall giving a clear and simple order. No demon, including the upper ranks, was to act without my express permission. Are the two of you choosing to ignore me? A crushing, invisible pressure slammed down on the room. Two figures, previously standing in the shadows, buckled and were forced to their knees with a sickening crunch of bone. One of them was Mato, who's quivered under the strain. Bloodshot veins bulged across his golden-pupiled eyes, and the fangs in his clenched jaw creaked under the immense force. He looked less like a fearsome predator and more like a tortured animal, every fiber of his being straining against the invisible weight. The soft, deliberate sound of footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Mato, unable to lift his head, could only watch as a pair of immaculate, high-end leather boots approached. The tip of one boot came to a stop just inches from his face. "What is that look in your eyes?" The cold voice mused. "Hate. If it weren't for the fact that you still possess some minor abilities, I would have fused your worthless flesh and blood with what was left of Shokyu long ago." Crash. The leather boot lifted and then stomped down with ferocious, casual force. Half of Mato's head exploded in a shower of blood and gore. The damage, of course, was nothing. The flesh and blood on his shattered skull writhed and squirmed, reforming in the blink of an eye. This time, however, the defiance in his eyes was gone, replaced by a blank, expressionless subservience. He silently lowered his restored head. "I trust you now truly understand. You may leave. And remember, find the traitor, Tamayo." Mato and Lee, who's kneeling beside him like a statue, bowed in unison, their voices mechanical and hollow. "As you command, Lord Muzan." They rose to their feet stiffly, like puppets on strings. Without a single unnecessary movement or glance at each other, they backed away silently and vanished from the suffocating room. The heavy, carved wooden door swung shut, sealing the pressure within. The progenitor of demons, Muzan Kibatsuji, clad in a high-end, patterned suit, turned and walked to the study's large window. Outside, the dazzling nightscape of a bustling metropolis glittered, a carpet of 1,000 lights. But to him, this glorious monument of human civilization was nothing more than a dull, insignificant anthill, and its lights reflected as such in his scarlet, slitted pupils. "Heh, humans," he snorted with a disgust that was absolute. At that moment, the shadows in the corner of the room rippled like water. A new figure emerged, dressed in a neat suit and gold-rimmed glasses. He had gray skin and the unassuming appearance of a common demon. No one would ever guess that this creature was one of the 12 Kazuki, the terrifyingly powerful upper-rank 6, Kamuro. With a perfect, humble smile plastered on his face, he bowed a full 90 degrees to Muzan. "Lord Muzan," Kamuro's voice was as smooth and pleasant as a well-trained butler's. "According to your wishes, the plan proceeds flawlessly. The seeds we so carefully selected have taken deep root amongst the human elite. Panic, greed, their pathetic desire for power, these wonderful nutrients are nourishing our garden. Currently, over a third of their key government and military positions are held by our friends. With but a single command from you, humanity's proud weapons of steel and gunpowder can be turned against the last remnants of the Demon Slayer Corps. You will control this entire nation." His tone was laced with pride and temptation. He lifted his head slightly, his eyes flashing with shrewd calculation from behind his glasses, waiting for his master's praise, or perhaps, his approval to proceed. He was met with a dead, chilling silence. Muzan slowly turned, his crimson pupils falling on Kamuro like a pair of searchlights. There was no praise in his gaze, only a pure, unadulterated disgust, as if he were looking at a piece of filth. The perfect smile on Komaro's face froze. The next second, Muzin was in front of him. He moved so fast it was as if he'd teleported. Komaro had no time to react before a pale, slender hand, imbued with a destructive power that could unravel a demon's very being, clamped around his neck. Ugh! The force of the grip sent his glasses flying. He was lifted off his feet, the feeling of his neck bones shattering and the inability to breathe hitting him all at once. Komaro, Muzin's voice was an icy whisper, filled with a contempt that cut deeper than any blade. You seem far too obsessed with the games these lowly ants play. Komaro's eyes were wide with terror. His crushed throat could only produce a hoarse, gurgling sound as he tried in vain to defend himself. Control humanity. Muzin's lips curled into a cruel, mocking sneer. These insects, with their fragile toys of steel and gunpowder, they have limited lifespans and their thoughts as filthy as maggots. Are they worthy of my control? Bang! He slammed Komaro's body onto the floor like a broken sack of trash. The impact cracked the expensive marble, but Komaro, despite his grievous injuries, scrambled to his knees in trembling fear. Muzin looked down at him, his expression one of utter condescension. Remember your identity, Komaro. The only value in your existence is to use the fear and stupidity of these ants to clear obstacles for me. Create chaos. Find what I want. That is all. He slowly walked forward, the cold tip of his shoe lifting Komaro's chin, forcing the demon to look into his scarlet eyes. Do not ever suggest that I should condescend to rule over these insects. They are not worthy. Do you understand? Komaro could only tremble and squeeze out a broken whisper. I understand. Lord Muzin. I overstepped. I will remember. Muzin coldly withdrew his foot as if he had touched something unclean. He turned back to the window, his voice returning to its superior indifference. Continue your mission. Use your human methods. Find Tamayo, and find the girl who conquered the sun. How you use the ants is your own affair, so long as the result satisfies me. Now, leave. Yes, yes. I will take my leave. Komaro struggled to his feet and crawled back toward the shadows, his posture the very definition of humility. But just as his figure was about to merge completely with the darkness, the look of terror on his lowered face vanished, replaced by a cold, deep, and utterly calculating sneer. 302 Chapter 302 They sat side by side on the cool overturned metal of a giant spindle, so close that the warmth of their bodies seeped through their clothes. Shinobu leaned against him, tilting her head and resting most of her weight on his shoulder, like an exhausted kitten who had finally found a safe place to rest. Shinichi carefully adjusted his posture to let her lean more comfortably, his arm naturally wrapping around her shoulders. The tension, the embarrassment, and the overwhelming joy of the last hour swirled together inside him, leaving him feeling wonderfully, terrifyingly complicated. So, it was Lee who turned you into a demon, not Muzin? He asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. Combined with what happened to Shinobu, he had a strong suspicion that they hadn't joined Muzin's side willingly. But that was just a guess for now. I can't remember the details, not clearly. Shinobu's voice was soft, laced with a lingering confusion. I just remember the fight with Lee. It was brutal. And then, everything was chaos. When I came to, I was already like this. She raised a hand, looking at the dark purple lines that snaked up her pale skin. It felt strange, but also powerful. And there was this urge. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. As for how it happened, my memory is foggy. But I'm sure of one thing. I never felt that disgusting presence of Muzin. After speaking, she shook her head and nestled closer to him. Shinichi pondered this, then turned his head to look at her. He met her watery violet eyes and, though he hated to ask, he knew he had to. Shinobu, he began hesitantly. After you became a demon, have you done anything to humans? His words trailed off, but a mind as sharp as hers immediately understood the unspoken question. A cunning, playful light flashed in her eyes. In an instant, her body began to tremble slightly. Her expression shifted to one of pure panic, and her eyes welled up with a fresh layer of mist. I didn't want to, Shinichi. She cried, her voice choked with theatrical sobs. I really didn't. But my body, it was out of control. The desire for blood, it was too strong. It was like 1,000 hands were tearing at my soul. I fought it. I really fought it. But, She grew more agitated as she spoke, her tears threatening to spill over. She clutched his shirt with both hands like it was her only lifeline, her body shaking like a leaf in an autumn wind. I really don't want to hurt anyone, Shinichi. She lifted her tear-streaked face to his, her expression one of desperate helplessness. It was a look that could shatter a man's heart. But that impulse. I think I couldn't control it. I ate someone. What? Eat someone? Shinichi's eyes went wide. A chill shot up from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head, and his mind went completely blank. Looking at Shinobu's devastated, hopeless expression, he was instantly overwhelmed by a huge, crushing heartache. Shinobu. He instinctively pulled her into a bone-crushingly tight hug, his arms a steel cage, as if he could physically shield her from all the pain and self-blame. Stop talking. It's okay. I believe you. No matter what, I believe you. It's not your fault. I should have protected you. Lady Tamayo is working on a cure. You'll get better. You will. He stumbled over his words, his mind racing incoherently. He tried to think of comforting things to say, of a future where this could be fixed. He even began to imagine how he would face the Demon Slayer Corps, how he would plead with them to accept not one, but two demonized Hashira. But just as he was spiraling into a panic, holding the trembling Shinobu tightly in his arms, he noticed the shuddering in her body change. It was no longer the racking sobs of a breakdown, but a strange, tiny, and very suppressed tremor. Shinobu continued her tragic tale. I couldn't stop myself. I ate all those other demons. It was like an instinct. I really didn't want to, Shinichi. Will you dislike me for this? No, of course not. Even if you ate. Wait. Shinichi, who was halfway through a comforting platitude, suddenly froze. He felt like he had just heard a record scratch in his brain. What did she just say she ate? He slowly lowered his head and met a pair of sparkling violet eyes, now filled with a sly, triumphant smile, without a single tear in sight. Pfft, ha ha. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. A clear, sweet laugh like a silver bell burst from her lips. She pulled her head back from his chest, not a trace of panic on her face, only the dazzling, victorious smile of a successful prankster. You stupid blockhead, she giggled, poking his cheek. Your expression right now, haha, it's just too cute. Shinichi just stared, his own face a mixture of confusion, dullness, and dawning suspicion. Did you really think I would eat people? She teased, raising an eyebrow. Honestly, who do you think I am? I'm the insect Hashira, Shinobu Koko. Even if I become a demon, I'm a demon with principles. She held up her hand, shaking the fingers with the strange purple lines. A wisp of deep purple mist lingered on her claws. To be precise, it's not really eating them, she explained. When I poison other demons, my body can absorb energy from their dissolving blood. It replenishes my strength. So, she leaned in, her smile turning sinister, if you really dare to look down on me for that, hee. She didn't finish the sentence, but the sudden thickening of the poison mist at her fingertips made it clear that the consequences would be severe. You. Shinichi was both furious and utterly relieved, and for a moment, he couldn't find a single word to describe the impossible girl in his arms. Her. Behind them, Maru and I, who had been lying on the ground watching the whole drama unfold, let out a loud, bored yawn, his dark eyes rolling up to show the whites. Just two overly dramatic humans. 303, Chapter 303. A rather peculiar trio made their way down a small road on the outskirts of Hiraka County. On a sweltering hot day, a handsome young man carried a figure on his back, completely swaddled in a thick coat with not an inch of skin exposed. Trotting behind them was a cute black Shiba Inu, looking thoroughly unimpressed with the whole situation. Isn't that young man hot? Forget him, the person on his back must be boiling, wrapped up so tightly. The whispers of the passers-by naturally reached Shinichi's ears, but he paid them no mind. As for who he was carrying, that was obvious. Shinobu's transformation had come from Lee. Although she had conquered the instinct to harm humans, she still couldn't walk in the sun. Through the thick fabric of the coat, Shinobu gently traced circles on his back with her finger, her voice a mischievous whisper in his ear. So, how did everyone react when I disappeared? Did my sister cry? Does that grumpy Sanemi actually have a soft spot for you? Oh, What a shame I missed seeing Yuichiro cry. I bet he was adorable. Shinichi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was as if becoming a demon had flipped a switch in her. Not only was she a little taller, but her original teasing nature had been refined into a masterclass of playful torment. She wasn't even hiding the fact that she wanted to see her own student cry. Still, he answered her questions one by one. Yuichiro was devastated. He was only 14 after all. But with the comfort of his very caring master, he managed to pull through. "Oh, is that so?" she purred. "What about you, Shinichi? Did you cry for me?" He couldn't see her face, but he could practically hear the wicked, curved smile in her voice. "Me? No. Why would I cry? I'm not that fragile," he answered, his voice a little too stiff. "Ah, so I'm not that important in your heart, Shinichi-kun? And here I thought we had something special. I suppose it's best we keep our distance when we get back. We wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong idea." "No, Shinobu, please, can you stop playing around?" he pleaded. "Who did you even learn this from?" A woof. The little Shiba Inu following behind them let out an exasperated bark, as if to say, "Can you two annoying lovebirds please just get on with it?" Upon arriving in town, Shinichi immediately bought 2 tickets for the next train to Tokyo. The private compartment would allow him to seal the windows so Shinobu could finally get some fresh air. As they went to board, a train attendant moved to check on the heavily bundled figure on Shinichi's back, but his wrist was caught in a firm grip. One threatening glare from Shinichi, followed by the flash of a police officer's ID, and they were quickly ushered aboard with the warmest of welcomes. Click. After tightly closing the compartment's blinds, ensuring not a single ray of sunlight could get in, Shinichi carefully unbuttoned the coat. A purple shadow flashed past him, and he was suddenly knocked off his feet, stumbling back onto the plush sofa-like seat. "Shinobu, what are you doing?" he asked, surprised to see her hugging him tightly, her butterfly wings fluttering behind her, her eyes glowing a deep, intense purple. But he soon understood. "Hungry," she stated, a simple expression of a primal, biological need. "Hungry." Shinichi was stunned for a moment. He couldn't exactly order from the dining car. She was like him now, able to draw energy from other demons. But where was he supposed to find a demon on a moving train? His eyes darted around the compartment, and then, he saw it. Maruenai, who was happily stretching in his seat, suddenly felt 2 unfriendly gazes fall upon him, a greedy one from Shinobu, and a strangely scrutinizing one from Shinichi. "Arf. What do they want?" Maruenai trembled, especially under Shinobu's stare. She looked at him like he was a perfectly cooked sausage. "Hey, I'm a dog, not a hot dog." Shinichi quickly snapped out of it. Maruenai was family. He reached out and gently pressed his palm against Shinobu's face, turning her head away from the terrified dog. Since there was no other choice. "All right, Shinobu," he sighed, offering his own arm. "Just, be gentle." A strange, tingling numbness spread up his fingers as he felt his own vitality being drained away. It was an odd sensation, but not entirely unpleasant. He heard Shinobu hum happily, saying that it tasted very good, with a faint fragrance of wisteria. Knock, knock, knock. A gentle knock came from the compartment's wooden door. "Sir, would you be in need of any service?" "No, thank you. We're fine." He, are you quite sure?" The voice outside purred, its tone shifting from polite to frivolous. "Accepting our service comes with certain benefits. For example, information about the Demon Slayer Corps." Before the voice could finish, the door exploded inward. Bang! A green blade, wreathed in a terrifying purple mist of poison, shattered the wood. The tip of the sword stopped just shy of the gray-skinned figure's neck, the combined murderous intent of 2 Hashira freezing him in place. Shinichi's amber eyes locked onto the figure outside the car, and his pupils shrank. Upper rank 6. He recognized the demon immediately, the unassuming, gray-skinned creature in a train crew uniform, a smarmy confident smile plastered on his face. It was Kamuro. My. Forest Hashira and Insect Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. The demon chuckled, completely unfazed by the blade at his throat. "How fascinating. To think that we are all of the same kind, yet find ourselves on such opposite sides." "Same kind," Shinichi said coldly. "The only thing we have in common is that I'm about to send you to the underworld to join the rest of them." He didn't hesitate. With a snarl, he slashed downward, while Shinobu thrust her own poison-laced blade forward. Now, wait just a boom. The entire train car shook violently. As an upper rank, Kamuro was not so easily dispatched. Just as their blades were about to connect, his body melted into a pool of shadow, seeping into the floor as if he'd prepared for this exact attack. His voice echoed from the shadows, still laced with that infuriating, casual amusement. No need to be so excited, you two. Don't you remember what I said? Are you interested in discussing that information about the Demon Slayer Corps? 304, Chapter 304. We can talk this over. If a real fight breaks out, weak as I am, I could still manage to take the dozens of humans on this train with me to the grave. So, the question is, does the noble forest Hashira want these innocent people to die alongside me? The tip of Shinichi's blade never wavered. Are you threatening us? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. His grip on the hilt tightened, his muscles coiling, searching for a single opening to end this in one clean strike. The demon shrugged. Isn't it obvious? I am using every human on this train to threaten you. Oh, and I should remind you, I'm a master of escape. The most likely outcome here is that I kill everyone on this train and still get away. Shinichi sneered. The sun will be up soon. Don't tell me you've overcome it. If you had, Muzan would have eaten you alive by now. Then there's nothing to discuss. Kamuro sighed, tilting his head. The shadows behind him began to ripple, as if preparing to unleash something. What could we possibly have to talk about? Shinobu snapped from behind Shinichi. Why would we listen to an upper rank? We are demon slayers. You are demons. Our job is to send you to hell. The shadows behind the demon suddenly stilled. He smiled. A good point. But that is precisely why you should listen. If my goal was simply to kill you, I wouldn't have bothered with this conversation. It would have been far easier to use a little trick to make the forest Hashira go berserk. Just like last time. You. A surge of pure rage shot through Shinichi. He lunged forward, his blade aimed to cleave that smirking face in two, but he stopped short as Shinobu's hand gripped his arm. Kamuro, sensing he had pushed the taunt as far as he could, decided to drop his bombshell. Our Lord has authorized me to use the power of the demon to lure your corrupt human leaders into submission, he said, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. And it is working beautifully. If all goes according to plan, we will soon command hundreds of thousands of human soldiers, armed with artillery and rifles, to encircle and annihilate you demon slayers, the very people you're sworn to protect. The words landed like a physical blow. For Shinobu, it was a horrifying thought. For Shinichi, it was a living nightmare. The night in Yoshiwara flashed before his eyes, the manipulated police, his own mind lost to rage, the horror of cutting down the very humans he was meant to save. There was nothing more chilling than being stabbed in the back by the people you would die for. It's true, Hashira, the demon continued, pulling a handsome wooden chair from the shadows and sitting down, crossing his legs. You have to understand, the nature of our lives is different. For the promise of a long life and a taste of real power, your greedy human leaders have far fewer morals than you could possibly imagine. He paused, admiring the stone-cold horror on their faces. The smile on his lips deepened. Just picture it. You're on the front lines, shouting your vows to protect humanity, and suddenly, the sound of rifle fire erupts from behind you. TSK TSK. That scene will surely be most exciting. Despicable. Shinobu hissed, her eyes burning with a cold fire. Exploiting human weakness to turn them against each other. A shameless tactic worthy of a creature who lurks in the shadows. Shameless. Kamuro raised an eyebrow. No, insect Hashira. This is simply reality. We have power. Humans have organization and weapons of destruction. We are merely taking what we each need. It's just that man. He paused, and for a fleeting second, a flicker of what sounded like contempt entered his voice. He pursues his own individual perfection, and disdains the masses. A bit of a waste, in my opinion. Shinichi caught it. That flicker of insubordination. That man. He could only mean Muzan Kibutsuji. This demon in front of him was not as loyal as he appeared. He wasn't Sanemi, who would have charged in long ago. He forced down the rage, his mind racing. Why was this demon telling them this? To show off? To demoralize them? What good did revealing Muzan's ultimate trump card do for their side? What is your goal here? Shinichi's voice was as cold as a blade, his eyes sharp, trying to see past the demon's smiling mask. What do you gain by telling us this? Are you just enjoying our despair? Or, is there something else you want? The smile on Komaro's face never wavered. Gain. He chuckled. Perhaps. I just believe you have a right to know. After all, watching a group of righteous heroes walk unknowingly into a perfectly laid trap, while amusing, always feels a little lacking in drama. He tilted his head, his gaze deep and calculating. Or maybe, I just want to see what choice you'll make, now that you know the truth. Will you bury your heads in the sand and fight us to the bitter end? Or will you perhaps provide a more interesting surprise? He slowly stood up, and the shadows behind him began to writhe, wrapping around his body like a living cloak. As for what I'm planning. His voice became ethereal, seeming to come from a great distance. That is not something you need to concern yourselves with. I am, after all, just a minor character in this play. He gave them one last, deep look, his eyes filled with a strange, unreadable emotion. Enjoy the rest of your journey. When you hear the sound of human gunfire at your backs, I do hope you can still manage to smile. As the words faded, the writhing shadow completely swallowed his figure, leaving only a faint, unsettling laugh echoing in the train car. The compartment fell into a dead silence. For reasons he didn't fully understand himself, Shinichi had let him go. He and Shinobu stood there, still gripping their swords, their hearts heavier than ever before. Shinichi. Shinobu's voice was low with doubt. What does he want? He slowly sheathed his blade, his amber eyes fixed on the spot where the demon had vanished, a contemplative and vigilant light shining within them. I don't know, he said, his voice grim. But one thing is certain. That demon may be more dangerous than any upper rank we have ever faced. 305, Chapter 305. Well, if it isn't the lovely Miss Ryakawa. Hello again. You must have been eager to see me. Tell me, did you enjoy the last shipment so much you're already back to place another order? Ryakawa Chinitsu felt a slight frown crease her brow. Across from her, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign businessman, a man who called himself Mans, was leaning forward with an exaggerated, salesman's smile plastered on his face. His Japanese was passable but carried a thick, unfamiliar accent that grated on her ears, and his overly expressive gestures felt entirely out of place in the quiet, refined lounge they occupied. Mr. Mans, it's a pleasure to see you as well, Chinitsu replied, her tone perfectly level, betraying none of her unease. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea. And yes, the materials you sourced for us last time were of exceptional quality. The Moriki group was very satisfied. But of course. He boomed, laughing a little too loudly. Only the best for my favorite clients. Indeed, she said, setting her cup down with a soft click. However, my reason for meeting you today isn't just about business. I have a few, small questions, unrelated to our usual transactions, that I was hoping you could help me with. Oh. Man's smile shifted, becoming a touch more curious, a bit more predatory. And what sort of trouble could possibly be clouding the mind of the brilliant and beautiful Miss Ryakawa? Chinitsu met his gaze directly, her own expression unreadable. I'd like to talk about the war. The one that just recently tore the world apart. For a fleeting second, the practiced smile on the foreigner's face vanished. A strange, calculating light flickered in his blue eyes before being just as quickly concealed. He hadn't expected this. Not from her. Ryakawa Chinitsu, the young, shrewd tycoon who ran the Moriki group, had always seemed utterly consumed by commerce and industry, never paying the slightest bit of attention to global politics or the messy affairs of nations. He had her pegged as a brilliant but insulated workaholic. This sudden interest was intriguing. But then, a wider and more genuine smile spreading across his face, this was even better. This could be an opportunity. After all, there were plenty of powerful people across the globe who were growing very envious of this isolated island nation and the resources it held. Perhaps the brilliant Miss Ryakawa was finally ready to play a bigger game. Later that day, the bustling energy of Tokyo felt a world away as Chinitsu knelt on a tatami mat in a silent, hallowed room. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and subtle incense. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled through a meticulously cared-for garden. Yubaya Shiki-san, she began, her voice low and filled with a frustration she hadn't shown Mr. Mans. Based on everything I've managed to gather, the situation is unchanged. Both the cabinet and the highest levels of the military are completely indifferent to the existence of the Demon Slayer Corps. The Yubayashiki family's name, it no longer holds the weight it once did with these new, ambitious men in power. I'm so sorry. My Moriki group's influence in those circles is still far too limited to force their hand. In front of her, lying on a futon, was Kaguya Yubayashiki, the 97th leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. A terrible curse had ravaged the upper half of his face and was slowly consuming his body, but his voice, when he spoke, was as calming as a gentle stream. Ahem. Chinatsu-san, please, you mustn't say such things, he rasped, the effort of speaking evident. The Moriki group has already given us more help than we could have ever asked for. Every single member of the Corps is indebted to your family's kindness. You carry no obligation to do so much for us, and it is certainly not your burden to bear alone. As he spoke, the frail man began to push himself up, his wife Amina rushing to support his trembling frame. He intended to bow to her, a gesture of profound gratitude. Chinatsu's heart lurched. Yubayashiki-san, no. She moved forward in a rustle of silk, gently placing her hands on his shoulders to stop him. You must rest. Please, your health is what's most important right now. Everything I do for the Corps, I do of my own free will. It was Mitsuyo-sama's final wish. As long as I am in charge of the Moriki group, I will use every resource at my disposal to help you. I swear it. A steely resolve sharpened her voice, a promise forged in grief and loyalty. Cough. Chinatsu-san, Kaguya breathed, his strength failing him. The Corps is truly blessed to have a friend like you. Seeing he couldn't complete the bow, he relented, allowing Amina to gently guide him back down. She looked at Chinatsu with eyes full of gratitude before carefully tucking the quilt around her husband. Kaguya's breathing was shallow and ragged, but the gaze he fixed on Chinatsu seemed to pierce through the fog of his illness. It was a look of profound understanding, as if he saw possibilities and pathways that remained invisible to ordinary people. The young master, who looked like a flickering candle in the wind, let out a soft sigh. A faint, resolute smile touched his pale lips. As you've said, Chinatsu-san, the leaders of this country no longer see value in what we do. In fact, under the whispers of certain dark influences, I fear they are beginning to see us as a threat, a private militia they can't control. We cannot count on their support. For 1,000 years, the Demon Slayer Corps has fought this battle alone in the shadows. He paused, gathering what little strength he had, the air in the room growing heavy with anticipation. Even the birdsong from the garden seemed to fall silent. Therefore, Kaguya's voice dropped, becoming a near whisper, yet carrying an unshakable weight that sent a shiver down Chinatsu's spine. We can no longer afford to be reactive. We must take the initiative. Chinatsu's heart hammered against her ribs. Take the initiative? Yubayashiki-san, what are you suggesting? Muzan Kibutsuji and his demons have gone to ground, Kaguya explained, his gaze drifting towards the ceiling as if he could see straight through it to the night sky where his ancient enemy dwelled. They have all the time in the world. We do not. But Muzan has one critical, defining weakness, one that has remained consistent for a millennium. He turned his head slowly, and though his eyes were clouded and nearly blind, they seemed to burn with an intensity that startled Chinatsu. It was a thrilling, terrifying contrast to his decaying body. His arrogance. He is arrogant beyond comprehension. He sees all humans as insects, and he sees the Demon Slayer Corps as the most irritating pests of all. He must have dreamt, countless times, of the day he could personally watch the Yubayashiki line and the entire Corps be annihilated, to see us crushed in despair. Chinatsu held her breath, a horrifying premonition beginning to form in her mind. She stared at the man on the bed, her eyes wide with disbelief. So, Kaguya's voice was as soft as falling ash, but each word struck Chinatsu like a thunderclap. Let's give him that chance. My lord. Amina cried out softly, her face instantly draining of all color. Her hand flew to her husband's, gripping it tightly. She knew exactly what he was implying. You mean? Chinatsu's voice trembled, laced with shock. You can't mean, to use yourself as bait. Yes, Kaguya confirmed, his voice eerily calm, as if he were discussing the weather. We will leak information. We will let it be known that I am on my deathbed, that the curse has nearly claimed me. And then, we will leak the precise location of the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. That's suicide. Chinatsu shot to her feet, her composure finally breaking. It's far too dangerous. If Muzan believes you're dying and he knows where to find you, he won't just send one of his moons, he'll bring his entire force down on this place. The core will face an onslaught unlike anything we've ever seen, and you would be at the very center of it. The image of that carnage, of this sacred place becoming a bloodbath, was too horrific to contemplate. That, Kaguya said, that gentle, unwavering smile still on his face, is precisely the goal. That is exactly what I want. We let him believe victory is within his grasp. We let him think he can finally eradicate the two things he has hated for centuries, the Yubayashiki family and the Demon Slayer Corps, in one single, glorious night. He craves absolute victory, a triumph so complete it erases us from history. Only by feeding that colossal arrogance will we have a chance of luring the man himself out of the shadows. He has to appear in person. If he doesn't, we will be doomed to chase his phantom for another 100 years, while countless more innocent people suffer and die. No, it's not an option, Chinatsu said firmly, staring down at him. The Hashira would never agree to such a plan. None of the Slayers would. They would never, ever be willing to risk your life like this. Kaguya's smile softened into something melancholic, something filled with a profound and lonely love for the swordsmen he considered his children. I know, he replied softly. That's why. I haven't told them. Please read my new FTFIC fairy tale, I Am Apensarum. 306, Chapter 306. Inside the glittering expanse of the hotel's grand ballroom, a lavish cocktail reception was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers dripped light from the high ceilings, casting a brilliant sheen across the marble floors and the priceless art adorning the walls. The air was a heavy, intoxicating blend of champagne, expensive cigars, and designer perfume. Here, the nation's elite gathered. Elegantly dressed government officials, nobles, and the heads of powerful corporations moved through the room with practiced grace. They held delicate wine glasses, wore perfectly composed smiles, and exchanged pleasantries in hushed tones over the melodic strains of a string quartet. It was a carefully constructed portrait of peace and prosperity, a world of power and wealth far removed from the lives of ordinary people. But beneath the shimmering surface, dangerous undercurrents were churning. In a secluded corner of a terrace, overlooking the glittering spectacle below, two figures sat across from each other. One was Counselor Fujiwara Yuzuki, an influential figure in the Ministry of Communications. He was a man in his 50s, slightly overweight, with his hair slicked back with meticulous care. His face was etched with the practiced reservation of a man long accustomed to power, but tonight, it was marred by a subtle, anxious sheen of sweat. Across from him sat a man who seemed perfectly at ease in a tailored dark suit. He was handsome, with a scholarly air about him, and a gentle, disarming smile that never seemed to leave his lips. But behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his deep brown eyes would occasionally flash with an inhuman coldness, a detached amusement, as if he were watching a meticulously staged play unfold just for him. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, not drinking, but simply enjoying its rich aroma. Kamuro-san, Counselor Fujiwara began, his voice a low, nervous tremor that held both excitement and fear. The effects were astonishing, like something from a dream. But what you're asking me to do in return, it's too dangerous. I don't have the kind of power to interfere with military affairs, and certain cabinet departments are already starting to ask questions. Danger. The man known as Kamuro chuckled, a soft, magnetic sound that held a strangely calming quality. Counselor Fujiwara, with all due respect, isn't your entire world built on danger? Political infighting, shifting alliances, one wrong step and you lose everything. A colleague who seems invincible one day can be ruined by a scandal the next, or simply, disappear. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that felt both intimate and menacing. What you truly desire, is it not the power to control that danger, to turn it into your own strength? Fujiwara Yuzuki swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. The man's words struck the very core of his deepest ambitions and fears. He had seen too many powerful men fall, and his obsession with holding onto his position was matched only by his profound insecurity. That wine of immortality you gave me, Fujiwara rasped, his voice trembling with a raw, undeniable greed. Can I have more? The last dose, the effect is starting to fade. Kamuro's smile widened. It was the quiet, satisfied expression of a hunter watching his prey walk willingly into a trap. Of course, Counselor. You are a valued partner. The wine of immortality can halt your aging, grant you boundless energy to navigate the political arena, and shield you from plots both seen and unseen. It can even grant you other, more special abilities. He paused, letting the words hang in the air as he savored the burgeoning desire in the politician's eyes. However, the most precious things in life always require the most careful payment. A cold dread washed over Fujiwara. What else do you want? Our agreement was that I would handle matters within the Ministry of Communications. I can't influence the military. The best I can do is introduce you to a few generals. Don't worry, counselor. We don't need you to move mountains. Just a little convenience, Komuro said, his voice so gentle it nearly blended with the distant music. For a man in your position, these are trivial things. A signature on a document, a voiced opinion at the right meeting, or perhaps simply looking the other way when certain files cross your desk. Then, as Fujiwara watched with growing unease, Komuro laid out his requests. An adjustment to night patrol schedules in several specific districts. The authorization to permanently seal a handful of old, forgotten case files and missing persons reports. A proposal for special monitoring and asset restrictions on a few ancient, declining families. The more Fujiwara listened, the more his stomach twisted. The requests seemed random, almost nonsensical on their own. But his political instincts, honed over decades, screamed that they were pieces of a puzzle with an unimaginably dangerous purpose. This was no ordinary bribery scheme. What are you planning? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, the suspicion in his eyes deepening. Komuro's gentle smile never wavered, but the inhuman coldness behind his glasses seemed to expand, becoming an endless, dark abyss. Counselor, for some questions, knowing the answer is the greatest danger of all. You only need to know that by working with us, you will receive the vitality, the security, and the long road to power you've always craved. Refusing. He wagged a finger playfully, a graceful but chilling gesture. Well, I imagine you have no desire to experience the consequences of that. Fujiwara shuddered violently. He remembered the incredible rush of energy and clarity the wine had given him, a feeling of youthful power he hadn't known in 30 years. But he also remembered the creeping, gnawing hollowness that followed as it wore off, a feeling like his very life force was being siphoned away. The withdrawal was a more terrifying threat than any weapon. It was a perfectly designed addiction, one that preyed not on the desire for pleasure, but on the primal fear of pain. Komuro waited patiently, like a spider watching a fly struggle in its web. He enjoyed this part, the moment these self-important humans wrestled with their greed and their fear, only to inevitably sacrifice their principles, their loyalties, their very souls. What do I need to do? Finally, Fujiwara's voice emerged, hoarse and heavy with resigned despair, yet still laced with a pathetic flicker of avarice. The smile on Komuro's face at last reached his eyes. It was the cruel, triumphant smile of a predator. Counselor Fujiwara was not the first powerful human he had broken, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. Demon Slayer Core, he thought to himself with a private, mocking laugh. Let's see how you respond when the very system you seek to protect begins to work against you. As if trying to prove his newfound worth, Fujiwara leaned in. By the way, Komuro-san, there is one more thing. The Moriki Group, the one that's been making such big waves in the business world. I've heard from reliable sources that they've been in contact with quite a few high-level military and political figures recently. 307, Chapter 307. 2 days ago. In the aftermath of Komuro disappearance, the train car fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks. Maru and I, the little Shiba Inu, paced restlessly, his nose twitching as he occasionally bared his teeth at a spot where the demon's foul scent still lingered like a stain on the air. Seated opposite each other, Shinichi and Shinobu wore identical solemn expressions. The creature's final, mocking words echoed in their minds, a venomous whisper they couldn't shake. That was a truly bizarre demon, Shinobu murmured, propping her chin on one hand. With the other, she reached across the small table and playfully pinched Shinichi's fingers, which he had rested there unconsciously. Her eyes held a mischievous glint, a stark contrast to the gravity of her words. Are we actually supposed to believe a word of its nonsense? To trust a demon? A powerful upper rank, no less. The very idea would have been the most ridiculous joke told in the 1,000-year history of the Demon Slayer Corps. And yet, if it was true, the information the demon had so casually offered was beyond terrifying. It painted a picture of a desperate, unwinnable war, a situation the Corps had never conceived of, let alone faced. The horror of demons had always been their monstrous individual strength and their bizarre blood demon arts. But the terror of humanity was its own beast entirely. The Great War that had just ravaged the world, claiming tens of millions of lives, was a grim testament to that. Humans had iron discipline and weapons of terrifying destruction. The thought of that power being turned against them by their own kind was paralyzing. Shinichi's brow was furrowed in thought, but seeing the deep worry in Shinobu's eyes, he pushed his own confusion aside. He gently captured her increasingly restless hand, giving it a firm, reassuring squeeze, a silent return for her earlier pinch. "Who's to say what's true?" he said, his voice steady. "But think about it. If demons could really corrupt the highest levels of government, why wouldn't Muzan have done it centuries ago? It would be far more effective than relying on an army of lesser demons who can only hunt in the dead of night. Besides," he added, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, "that creature's attitude, it didn't feel like it was truly one of Muzan's loyal followers." "It didn't seem completely loyal to him," Shinobu agreed, her violet eyes widening slightly as she caught his meaning. I think it told us that because it wants to use us for some purpose of its own." "Use us?" A cold smile touched Shinichi's lips. "To stop Muzan? Maybe even kill him? If that's what it wants, then I'm more than happy to be used." A genuine, almost dangerous-looking grin spread across his face. "Tisk, you're no fun, Shinichi," Shinobu pouted, though her spirits seemed to lift. "I'm just joking here. None of them are good, obviously." With a rustle of her butterfly-patterned haori, she stood and gracefully moved to the seat beside him. Shinichi instinctively raised an arm, allowing her to lean comfortably against his side. Once she was settled, he let his hand rest on her head, gently stroking her dark hair. Shinobu hummed, closing her eyes in contentment. The familiar, comforting scent of grass and trees that always clung to him filled her senses. The warmth of his hand was a little itchy, but in the best way possible. "That's nice." "Arf." Growling. A series of agitated yaps came from the floor. Maru and I stared up at them, his big, dark eyes filled with betrayal. Before Shinobu had come along, and for most of their time in the Corps, he was the one who got Shinichi's exclusive head-rubbing service. All right, Maru and I, settle down," Shinichi chuckled. "It's almost time for dinner." "Awwah." The dog let out a sad, resentful whine, collapsing onto the floor with a dramatic sigh. Epsilon dash. Leaning against Shinichi, Shinobu cracked open one eye and stuck her tongue out at the sulking dog. For a moment, the butterfly pattern on her haori seemed to shimmer and cling to her form a little too closely, as if it were a part of her. If you didn't look too closely at the dangerous purple glint on her sharpened fingertips or the slight elongation of her canines, it would be hard to tell she had become a demon at all. Shinichi sighed, rubbing his own temples with his free hand. There was no point in trying to unravel the demon's tangled motives right now. That was a problem for when they got back to headquarters. For now, he needed a clear plan. "Whatever that creature's goal is," Shinichi said, his voice firm, "the threat of infiltration is real. We have to warn Oyakata-sama and the Hashira. Everyone needs to be vigilant, especially when dealing with government or military officials. I'll ask Chinatsu for her help as well, to see if her contacts have noticed anything unusual." To Shinobu, his words were a steadying force. She nodded vigorously against his shoulder. "Yeah, Shinichi's right. And about your body, Shinobu." Shinichi looked down at her. "I'm sure Lady Tamayo's research will help. Don't worry too much." Shinichi's right," she mumbled again, snuggling closer. Suddenly, snap. A sharp, unnatural noise from the end of the car made both of them jolt upright. In a single, fluid motion, Shinichi's hand was on his Nichiren blade, the steel clearing the scabbard by inches. A dangerous purple light pulsed at Shinobu's fingertips. Only Maru and I looked up, confused by their sudden, deadly tension. The door connecting the carriages slid open with a rattle. A smiling train conductor pushing a dining cart walked in. "Good afternoon, passengers. Would either of you care for some lunch, The conductor froze mid-step, his polite smile locked on his face. He stared, wide-eyed, at the two passengers who were now glaring at him with killing intent. "What is this?" he thought, his heart hammering in his chest. "Did I just walk into a gang fight? And why are that pretty girl's fingers glowing?" Shinichi and Shinobu glanced at each other, the tension instantly dissolving into shared embarrassment. 2 lunches, please, Shinichi said, forcing a slightly stiff smile. Thank you. Oh, okay. The conductor stammered, quickly handing them 2 bento boxes before practically fleeing the car. Once he was gone, the silence returned, this time filled with a much lighter air. Night had fallen by the time they finally arrived back at the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. They slipped in under the cover of darkness, their late return purposefully kept quiet to avoid disturbing the other members. But news traveled fast. As they crossed the main courtyard, a familiar voice cut through the night. Shinobu. A wave of relief washed over Shinobu's face, and she broke into a wide, genuine smile. Nei-san. 308, Chapter 308. A moment ago. The night was deep, blanketing the Moriki Manor in silence. Serving as the temporary headquarters for the Demon Slayer Corps, its halls and training grounds were quiet. Most of the Corps members, exhausted from a day of brutal training, were lost in a well-earned sleep. Within the massive estate, only the silent footsteps of a few patrolling slayers disturbed the peace, their figures moving like ghosts through the shadows, ever alert for the threat of a demonic attack. In the darker corners, elite guards provided by the Moriki group stood watch, their presence unseen but deeply felt. At that moment, 2 figures moved as if they were part of the night itself. They slipped over the high walls, bypassing the patrols with practiced ease, and landed softly in the most secluded corner of the gardens. The faint moonlight revealed them clearly, Shinichi and Shinobu. Shinichi remained vigilant, extending his senses like an invisible web, feeling out the life and energy of the manor around them. After confirming their arrival hadn't triggered an alarm or drawn unwanted attention, he allowed himself to relax slightly. He turned to look at Shinobu beside him. In the pale light, her head was bowed, her long, dark hair with its purple tips falling in a messy curtain that hid her face. Her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her haori, a small, telling sign of her deep anxiety. She had tried to prepare herself for this, but as she stood on the familiar grounds, the fear was overwhelming. Could she truly face her comrades looking like this? Could she face her sister, Connie? The question was a knot in her chest that only tightened with each passing second. Don't be afraid, Shinichi's voice came, low but steady, a calm anchor in her sea of turmoil. I'm here. Shinobu nodded, subconsciously shifting closer to him. She took a deep, shuddering breath and straightened her back. She was home. The Demon Slayer Corps was her home, and these people were her family. Shinichi thought their return had been subtle enough, but he had underestimated the keen senses of the Hashira who remained at headquarters, and the unbreakable power of a blood connection. In a room on the 2nd floor, a single lamp cast a warm, dim glow. Connie Coco sat at her desk, staring blankly at an open medical notebook. Suddenly, the hand holding her pen trembled, drawing a long, dark slash across the page. Her heart began to pound violently in her chest, a frantic, painful rhythm. An indescribable throbbing from the very core of her being made her lift her head, her gentle eyes staring out into the dark night. This feeling. Connie whispered, her voice trembling. Could it be Shinobu? At the same time, in another part of the manor. Humph. In his room, Sanemi Shinazugawa paused mid-stroke as he polished his Nichiren blade. His brow furrowed, and his intensely scarred face twisted into a scowl. His wild eyes darted towards the window, like a beast catching a scent on the wind. That smell. It's familiar. Is that you, Shinichi? In the adjacent room, Kyojuro Rengoku, who had been sitting cross-legged in deep breathing meditation, slowly opened his eyes. A flicker of confusion crossed his bright, golden-red gaze. Shinichi is back. And there is another presence with him, a very strange fighting spirit. It feels a bit like Shinobu, but warped. And deep within the manor, in the medical wing that had been converted into a laboratory, Lady Tamayo paused her work at her microscope. Beside her, Yushiro, who had been standing as still as a stone sculpture, immediately straightened, his expression sharp with vigilance. Lady Tamayo, what is it? Nothing to be alarmed by, she said, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. It seems our friends have returned. It was an almost subconscious reaction. With no prior signal, several of the most perceptive masters at headquarters began moving, drawn by an invisible thread toward the same secluded corner of the garden. Shinichi was about to lead Shinobu to see Kaguya Yubayashiki when he froze. A wry, helpless smile touched his lips. It seems we weren't as sneaky as I thought, he murmured, giving Shinobu's hand a gentle squeeze. Looks like the welcoming committee is on its way. Shinobu's body went rigid, and she instinctively shrank behind him, her breathing growing shallow and quick. The first to arrive was Sanemi. He landed before them like a hunting cat, dropping from a nearby rooftop in a gust of wind. His fierce, wild eyes locked onto Shinichi instantly, then swept like a sharpened blade to the shadowed figure hiding behind him, a presence that felt both familiar and sickeningly wrong. Shinichi, so you finally decided to come back, huh? Sanemi barked, his voice as rough and aggressive as his personality. Leaving your training to your apprentice while you run off and screw around. And who the hell is that behind you? What is this demonic stench? His hand was already gripping the hilt of his sword, and the air around him seemed to hum with the barely restrained power of his wind breathing. A moment later, Kyojuro appeared from the other side of the courtyard. He walked with a steady, confident stride, his golden red eyes filled with concern and scrutiny. Shinichi, welcome home. And who might this be? His gaze also fell on Shinobu, his brow furrowing as he, too, sensed the unnatural aura clinging to her. The atmosphere crackled, heavy and tense. Shinichi took a half-step forward, his body completely shielding Shinobu from their view, ready to explain. But just then, another sound cut through the standoff. The sound of light, hurried footsteps, filled with a desperate, hopeful urgency. Everyone turned. Running toward them through the night was the flower Hashira, Connie Coco. Her demon slayer uniform was hastily buttoned and messy, her long hair streaming loosely behind her. Her face was pale, her expression a mask of raw anxiety. She didn't even seem to see Shinichi or the other Hashira. Her eyes, wide and trembling, were fixed on the one spot they couldn't see, the hidden figure behind Shinichi. That feeling of blood connection, that cry from the depths of her soul, could not be mistaken. Shinobu. Connie's voice was a fragile whisper, like a dream, laced with the terror of having her hopes dashed. A layer of mist instantly clouded her gentle eyes. Is that you, Shinobu? That single, broken plea shattered the last of Shinobu's defenses. Behind Shinichi, she trembled violently. There was no more hiding. With immense, painful effort, she slowly stepped out from behind him, into the cold, unforgiving moonlight. Her purple-tipped hair, the sharp claws glinting at her fingertips, the fangs peeking from behind her lips, the faint, strange markings on her skin, and the violet eyes, her eyes, flashing with anxiety, guilt, and a powerful, overwhelming longing. The moment Connie saw her sister's face, it was as if she had been struck by lightning. She froze, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Tears, hot and immediate, burst from her eyes, streaming down her face like pearls from a broken string. This was not the sister she remembered. That aura, those features, it all pointed to a terrible, monstrous change. But those eyes, they were still Shinobu's. Nei-san. Shinobu looked at Connie's shocked, tear-streaked face, and her voice came out as a choked, guilty sob. I'm back. Those four simple words seemed to take every last ounce of her strength. Connie could no longer hold back. She lunged forward, throwing her arms around the sister she thought she had lost forever, holding her in a desperate, unbreakable embrace. Shinobu. Shinobu. My little sister. Connie wept, her hot tears soaking into Shinobu's hair. It's really you. You're alive. Oh, thank God, you're alive, that's all that matters, Hicks. She was incoherent, just repeating the words over and over, clutching her sister as if letting go would mean losing her all over again. Shinobu buried her face in her sister's warm, familiar embrace, her composure finally breaking. She sobbed like a lost child who had finally found her way home, all the pain and fear of the past weeks pouring out in that single, cathartic moment. The sight of the two sisters clinging to each other, their cries echoing in the night, instantly dissolved the tension in the courtyard. Sanemi slowly released his grip on his sword. He looked at them, made a sharp clicking sound with his tongue, and awkwardly turned his head away. What a pain, he muttered, but the gruffness of his words was betrayed by the undeniable softness in his eyes. A gentle, relieved smile spread across Kyojuro's face as he watched, and he gave a small, approving nod. Shinichi stood to the side, a silent guardian, his heart a mix of relief and a deep, aching empathy for them both. In the distance, standing in the dark shadows of a corridor, a massive figure draped in prayer beads watched the scene unfold. Gyomei Haimjima, the stone Hashira, clasped his hands together as silent tears streamed from his blind eyes, his lips moving in a quiet prayer of gratitude. 309, Chapter 309. The touching scene of the sisters clinging to each other lasted for a long time before their raw emotions began to settle. Connie held Shinobu's hand, gripping it tightly as if terrified she might vanish again. Her eyes, however, kept drifting to the strange, dark purple markings that snaked across the pale skin of her sister's arm, her gentle expression filled with heartache and worry. "Shinobu," Connie said softly, "Lady Tamayo is here at headquarters now. She's been researching a way to turn demons back into humans. Would you come with me to see her? She can help." Shinobu looked from her sister to Shinichi. Seeing the encouraging nod he gave her, she swallowed and whispered, "Yes. Shinichi told me about her. I would like to meet her." A wave of relieved joy washed over Connie's face. "Wonderful. Let's go right now." And just like that, with Connie protectively guiding her, the two sisters hurried off towards the temporary butterfly house, completely forgetting anyone else was there. They left Shinichi, Sanemi, and Kyojuro standing in the courtyard, looking at each other in the sudden silence. Sanemi Shinazugawa was the first to break the silence. He finally released the hilt of his Nichiren blade, crossing his scarred arms over his chest. He fixed Shinichi with a fierce glare. "All right, Shinichi, what the hell is going on? How did Koko end up like that? What did you run into out there?" Kyojuro Rengoku also turned his concerned gaze on him, his voice booming with its usual energy but laced with seriousness. "Shinichi, the aura around Shinobu has changed drastically, but her eyes are still clear. There must be a reason for this. We need an explanation." Shinichi looked at his two comrades, their concern expressed in entirely different but equally intense ways. Instead of answering immediately, he deflected with a question of his own. "This Hashira training must be a heavy burden. I know Connie is staying to help Lady Tamayo with her research, but what are you two still doing here?" Kyojuro laughed cheerfully. "Well, it is my turn, along with Hajime-san, to guard headquarters. As for Shinazugawa, the trainees have been lodging so many complaints about his methods that—" "Nonsense." Sanemi cut him off, a vein throbbing on his forehead. "I'm worried about Oyakata-sama's safety, that's all. Besides, I'm doing a better job than you, Shinichi. You tossed your training duties to that kid Yuichiro after only a few days. What kind of master does that? Don't change the subject. We're talking about Shinobu." Shinichi just smiled at Sanemi's outburst. Without any further prompting, he recounted their mission to Hiraka County, the encounter with the demonized Shinobu, and their battle on the train. He emphasized that although she had been turned, she had not harmed a single human and still fought against other demons. He finished by relaying the horrifying warning from the Upper Moon 6, Kamuro. "And that's what happened," Shinichi concluded, crossing his arms. "Shinobu's condition is unique. It will require Lady Tamayo's careful study. As for what Kamuro said, if any of it is true, then the Demon Slayer Corps is in more danger than we've ever been." Hearing the full story, Sanemi's brows knitted into a tight knot, his scarred face a mask of pure disgust and irritation. "Damn it all. That bastard Kamuro. A coward who hides in the shadows. The next time I see him, I'll slice him into 1,000 pieces. And those government bastards. How could they be so weak-willed? So easily corrupted? Pathetic." Kyojuro's expression was graver than Shinichi had ever seen it. He clenched his fists, his golden red eyes burning with a righteous fire. "Despicable. Utterly unforgivable. We must report this to Oyakata-sama immediately and begin planning our response." "I've already sent a brief report ahead with my Kashiguai Crow," Shinichi said. "I'll give Oyakata-sama the full details at dawn." As they were talking, the sound of light footsteps approached from a nearby corridor. All three turned to see the true owner of the manor, the queen of the business world, Ryukawa Chinatsu, walking towards them. "Shinichi-kun, you're back." Chinatsu's voice held a note of surprise, but it also sounded more hoarse and strained than usual. "Is Shinobu-san with you?" She glanced around, but didn't see the insect Hashira. "Chinatsu," Shinichi nodded. "Shinobu went through some things. She's with Lady Tamayo getting checked out." A flicker of understanding crossed Chinatsu's eyes, but she didn't press for details. She just sighed softly. "I hope she's all right. These are certainly troubled times." "What's wrong?" Shinichi asked, noticing her weariness. "You look exhausted. What brings you to headquarters so late?" Chinatsu seemed startled by the question. "A faint, tired smile touched her lips. Headquarters? If I'm not mistaken, this manor is the property of Moriki Group. Technically, that makes the Demon Slayer Corps my tenants. Perhaps I'm here to collect the rent. Shinichi's face fell into an awkward grimace. Hey, come on. What's all this, yours and mine, talk? We're partners in this. His flustered reaction made Chinitsu cover her mouth to hide a genuine, albeit faint, smile. She knew she couldn't tell him the real reason she was here, the devastating plan she had just discussed with Kaguya Yubayashiki. Shinichi, and every other Hashira, would never agree to it. So, she deflected with vague talk about business matters and seeking the Yubayashiki family's ancient wisdom, a plausible excuse given their long history. After a few more minutes of strained small talk, Chinitsu excused herself, her fatigue clearly visible. As she disappeared into the darkness, Sanemi snorted, thoroughly unimpressed by the exchange. Kyojuro maintained a polite smile, but a hint of questioning curiosity lingered in his eyes. Shinichi watched her go, his brow furrowed. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something heavy. Strange woman, Sanemi muttered. She seems to be under a great deal of pressure, Kyojuro observed thoughtfully. Meanwhile, inside the butterfly house. Alright, Shinobu-san, please open your mouth. Ah, yes, very sharp fangs. But otherwise, you appear to be in excellent health. Very energetic, in fact, Lady Tamayo said, her tone clinical but kind. Indeed. Shinobu even seems to have grown a little taller, Connie giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Hee, I remember how you always used to complain about being so small. Sister. Shinobu's voice was a mortified squeak. However, Lady Tamayo's tone turned serious. Demon transformation requires a source of energy. Ordinary demons must consume humans to survive. Even Yushiro and I require a small amount of human blood. The only exceptions I have ever documented are Nezuko Kamadu and Shinichi-san himself. How have you been sustaining yourself, Shinobu-san? The implication was clear, and the light-hearted atmosphere vanished. Connie looked at her sister, her eyes wide with worry. Shinobu, you didn't eat anyone, did you? Of course not. Humans don't even taste as good as Shinichi. Huh. Came the simultaneous, shocked reply from Connie and Lady Tamayo. Oh my. 310, Chapter 310. Zheng. The solitary, clear note of a Baiwa echoed and died, leaving the dimly lit infinity castle in absolute, unnerving silence. In this impossible dimension, woven from blood demon art, the laws of physics were a forgotten dream. Corridors twisted into Mobius strips, bridges connected nothing to nowhere, and upside-down doors opened into rooms that drifted like islands in a dark sea. The entire space shifted slowly, manipulated by an invisible, omnipotent hand. At the very center of this architectural nightmare, a figure sat quietly on an ornate wooden chair, radiating an aura of supreme, suffocating pressure. Suddenly, Muzan Kibutsuji's eyes snapped open. His scarlet, slit-pupiled gaze burned with raw impatience and festering irritability. A wave of cold, anxious killing intent rolled off him, so potent that the very fabric of the infinity castle seemed to tremble in fear. Perhaps it is time I reconsidered the value of my useless trash. Muzan's murmur was a low thunder that rumbled through the twisted space. For 1,000 years, not a single trace of the blue spider lily. The Demon Slayer Corps continues to breed like insects, yet my demons can't even locate their nest. What use are they to me? In the void below him, the Baiwa demon, Nakame, knelt with her head bowed low, her body trembling under the weight of her master's displeasure. She was the only other demon present, and the full force of Muzan's ambient rage washed over her. Her fingers, poised over the strings of her Baiwa, were frozen stiff, paralyzed by his aura. Muzan's patience, a notoriously finite resource, was gone. His all-consuming thirst for the blue spider lily, his obsession with conquering the sun and achieving true perfection, had eroded any semblance of his usual cold composure. The continued incompetence of his subordinates had stoked the fires of his rage to a breaking point. Just then, Nakame's hand twitched, and a string was plucked by reflex. Zheng. The space before Muzan rippled. From a writhing mass of shadows, an unassuming, gray-skinned figure emerged. He wore a humble smile, and his golden eyes were filled with an unnerving, placid respect. It was the Upper Moon 6, Kamuro. Muzan-sama, Kamuro said with a slight bow, his voice gentle and pleasant, a jarring contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. Muzan's cold gaze locked onto him, and the pressure in the room intensified, becoming a physical force. Kamaro, you had better be bringing me the good news I desire. His voice was an undisguised threat. A single word of failure, and he would tear this subordinate to shreds. The smile on Kamaro's face didn't falter. Muzan-sama, I have acquired 2 pieces of information through my human networks. I believe you will find them interesting. Speak. Muzan snarled, the sharp black claws that had erupted from his fingertips glinting menacingly. Kamaro bowed his head slightly. My lord, according to sources within several of Japan's ancient families, the current head of the Yubayashiki clan, and the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, Kaguya Yubayashiki, is on his deathbed. His family's curse is rapidly consuming him. He does not have long. Oh. A flicker of cruel amusement lit Muzan's scarlet eyes. Yubayashiki, that pathetic, gutter-dwelling clan that commands the rats, is their line finally about to be extinguished? Haha, what pleasant news. While it didn't advance his primary goal, the imminent demise of his ancient nemesis was a welcome balm to his frayed nerves. The second piece of information, Kamaro continued, his voice dropping with a hint of dramatic mystery, may be of more immediate use. Through our corrupted officials, combined with an analysis of unusual supply shipments, we have pinpointed the location of the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. It is a secluded estate near Tokyo, owned by the Moriki Group. Boom! The aura around Muzan exploded. A terrifying, tsunami-like wave of pressure slammed through the Infinity Castle. What did you say? You found their headquarters? Are you certain? Muzan shot up from his chair, a terrifying gleam in his crimson eyes. For centuries, he had hunted for the Demon Slayer's hidden lair, the nest where the Yubayashiki rats hid. To finally have it within his grasp. I am 90% certain, Master Muzan, Kamaro replied, maintaining his respectful bow. My intelligence indicates the Moriki Group has been a primary benefactor to the Corps for some time. The manor in question is heavily guarded, strategically located, and has seen a recent influx of individuals matching the description of slayers. All evidence points to this location. Good. Very good. A wide, predatory smile stretched across Muzan's face, filled with malice and murder. Kaguya Yubayashiki, there is nowhere left for your precious Corps to run. How fitting that I shall personally send you off in your final moments. And while I'm there, I will exterminate every last one of you annoying rats in a single night. He looked down at Kamaro, and for the first time, his gaze held a flicker of genuine approval. You have done well. It is my honor to serve you, my lord. Kamaro's head dipped lower, his perfect smile concealing everything. Summon all the upper moons. Muzan commanded, his voice now a booming decree that shook the dimension to its core. Right now, gather them here. Clang, buzz. With violent distortions of space and discordant strums of the Baiwa, a series of overwhelmingly powerful figures appeared in the void, answering the call of their absolute master. First came Kokushibo, Upper Moon 1. Dressed as a samurai of a bygone era, his 6 cold eyes slowly swept the chamber before settling on Muzan. He gave a slight, silent nod, as immovable as a mountain. Next, Space Rippled and Doma, Upper Moon 2, emerged in a shower of ice lotuses, the same serene, sympathetic smile fixed on his face. His rainbow-colored eyes scanned the room with placid curiosity, lingering on Kamaro for a moment. My, a new friend? Long time no see, everyone. Though I do still miss adorable Daki and Jayataro. Then came Akaza, Upper Moon 3. The martial arts demon radiated a furious fighting spirit, his gaze immediately finding Doma and filling with undisguised disgust. He was followed by Mato, Upper Moon 4. Built like an iron tower, his aura was that of a stoic warrior, a quiet contrast to Akaza's explosive energy. His golden, slit-pupiled eyes were downcast, and he stood in silent deference. Appearing after him was Lee, Upper Moon 5, a figure of indeterminate shape, hidden completely beneath a wide, gray cloak that seemed to swallow the light. Counting the ever-smiling Kamaro, the Upper Moon 6, the entire demonic leadership was now assembled. The final war was about to begin. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 311, Chapter 311. Chinatsu-sama, as instructed, we have met with a number of high-ranking officials. Several have shown goodwill towards our Moriki group. Furthermore, Councilman Fujiro from the Ministry of Internal Affairs let slip that many in the cabinet have had frequent contact with a mysterious individual named Kamaro. Apparently, the policy proposals from these council members have also been unusual. Listening to her subordinates report in her private office, Ryakawa Chinitsu frowned. Kamaro, have you investigated him? Yes, but it's a dead end. No matter how deep we dig, we can't find a single thing. It's as if the man materialized out of thin air. No past, no records, no trace. Appeared out of nowhere. A cold, humorless smile touched Chinitsu's lips. With the resources at her command, she could find out what the emperor ate for breakfast. The idea that some shady operator could remain a complete ghost was laughable. It's never that simple. However, Chinitsu-sama, her subordinate continued, while we found nothing on Kamaro himself, we did find a recurring rumor connected to his circle of influence. And what is that? It's something they call the wine of immortality. Jun. The final, sharp note of the Baiwa faded. With a cold snort and a final, dismissive glare at the 6 powerful demons assembled before him, Muzan Kibutsuji vanished from the Infinity Castle. In the vast, silent dimension, only the 6 upper moons remained, the oppressive tension left by their master slowly being replaced by something else entirely. Well now, hello to our new friends. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Doma. Upper Moon 2 was the first to speak with a serene smile on his face as he sat cross-legged in the air. Ah, and the gentleman with the golden eyes who looks so much like Akezadano. I do believe we've met before, haven't we? He cheerfully greeted Mato, Upper Moon 4, and Lee, Upper Moon 5, as if they were old, dear friends. Of course, Doma and Mato had met. That meeting had involved a rather fierce battle, and it had not been pleasant for either of them. Hearing Doma's cloying greeting, Mato simply shot him a look of utter disdain and sneered. Oh, how cruel. A golden fan materialized in Doma's hand, which he used to cover his mouth in a gesture of mock hurt. Shut your mouth. The enraged shout ripped through the silence. Akeza, Upper Moon 3, had veins bulging on his forehead. He jabbed a finger at Doma. Shut up, you disgusting creature. My pursuit of the ultimate martial path will not be tainted by your presence. He then turned to Mato, his eyes alight with a warrior's admiration. Your skill with that spear is magnificent. I did not expect to see you here. You are far stronger than the useless trash that came before you. Mato met Akeza's gaze with a flicker of mutual respect. They, too, had fought, and each had been deeply impressed by the other's dedication to combat. Likewise, was his simple, gruff reply. How wonderful. Swish. Before Mato could say more, a sickeningly graceful figure appeared at Akeza's side. A pale, slender hand came to rest on his shoulder, its sharp, blood-red nails gently scraping against Akeza's cord muscle. A cold, hypocritical voice whispered next to Akeza's ear. So, Akezadano knows him too. I thought I was the only one. What a shame. You must be so lonely, Akezadano, to only have one friend. If you'd told me, I could have introduced you to Gyoko and Daki ages ago. Such a pity they're gone. Crack. Akeza's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Bloodshot eyes glared as a surge of fighting spirit began to boil around him. He slowly tilted his head, locking eyes with Doma's handsome, smiling face. Take your hand off. What was that, Akezadano? I couldn't quite hear you, Doma cooed, tightening his grip and leaning in closer. Did you say you wanted to be my best friend? I said. Pfft. Blood sprayed through the air. A crimson spearhead had erupted from the front of Doma's face, piercing straight through his head like a skewer through a candied apple. He said. Mato growled from across the platform, holding the other end of his long spear, to take your claws off him. With a flick of his wrist, swish, he ripped the spear back. Half of Doma's head was torn away, flying through the air as a thick spray of blood rained down. Doma staggered back, letting go of Akeza. The grievous wound, however, was nothing to him. Flesh and bone writhed and reformed, and in the blink of an eye, his head was whole again. He licked a stray drop of blood from his lips with a serene smile. My, what a clean attack. A little exciting, I must admit. Can't win a fight on your own, Akezadano. Have to ask your little friend for help. Boom. The floor beneath Akeza's feet fractured, a massive snowflake-shaped crater forming from the sheer force of his rage. Keep talking, and I'll grind you into paste right here and now. Oh dear, Doma sighed, fluttering his golden fan. Akezadano says the most unrealistic things. If I had simply eaten you during our blood battle, you wouldn't be here to say such things at all. Do you want to die? The air exploded with raw power. Technique development, annihilation style. A terrifying volley of blue fists, forged from pure fighting spirit, rocketed towards the smiling Doma. Akaza. The low, cold voice cut through the chaos. A blade of impossible speed, shining with the cold light of the moon, slashed out of the void, aimed directly at Akaza's neck. It was Kokushibo who's finally intervening. Blood Demon Art, Shield. Crash. A massive, blood-red shield shaped like a tortoise shell materialized just in time, blocking Kokushibo's blade. A deafening roar echoed as the attack left a deep, sizzling gouge in the demonic shield. At the same instant, a wave of profound cold washed over the area. Blood Demon Art, Crystalline Divine Child, Doma sang. Boom, bang, crash. The shockwaves from the clashing techniques tore through the Infinity Castle, causing Nikame to flinch in terror. A cold glint of steel flashed in the hands of Lee, who had silently drawn several sharp weapons from beneath its cloak. Seeing the all-out brawl erupting, Kamuro, the Upper Moon 6, simply smiled and took several dozen steps back, putting a safe distance between himself and the chaos. It was always best not to get involved in the squabbles of his powerful, simple-minded colleagues. After all, he was just a weak, intelligent strategist, wasn't he? Please read my new fanfic, Fairy Tale Digimon Takeover. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 312, Chapter 312. The battle between the upper moons was a maelstrom of destruction. The shockwaves alone shattered countless structures in the Infinity Castle. Crescent-shaped blades of moonlight collided with a storm of blood-red spear thrusts, while fists of pure blue destruction met explosions of crystalline ice. Through the chaos, a dull gray light would flash, the glint of a hidden weapon. Swish. The ever-smiling Kamuro gracefully sidestepped a stray slash of energy that would have bisected him, simultaneously raising a hand to deflect a shuriken aimed at his face. Such energetic companions, he mused, turning to the silent Nikame beside him. Wouldn't you agree, my dear lady? She ignored him completely, her gaze fixed on the melee. The fight between Akaza and Doma was a whirlwind of pure hatred, while the peerless Kokushibo was single-handedly suppressing both Mato and Lee. Clang. The oppressive, resonant sound of the Baiwa suddenly cut through everything. The next second, as if a universal pause button had been pressed, every upper moon froze mid-motion. With an inferno of rage dancing in his scarlet eyes, Muzan Kibutsuji reappeared. He surveyed the wreckage of his castle, the aftermath of his subordinate's petty squabble, and the veins on his forehead bulged. The sheer force of his fury solidified the air, and the floor beneath his feet cracked and shattered. What, he seethed, do you think you are doing? He had been gone for mere minutes, and his capable commanders had already descended into this chaos. An apology is in order, Lord Muzan. Kokushibo's voice was as indifferent as ever. The brief but intense battle had not even ruffled his samurai uniform. In stark contrast, Mato and Lee were panting, their stances showing clear signs of exertion. Akaza knelt on one knee silently. As one of Muzan's more favored subordinates, he knew when to let his master's anger pass over him. Doma was likely the only one present with a relaxed, even playful, expression. He tilted his head, feigning a cute and innocent look. Ah, Muzan-sama, Akaza-dano and I were simply having a passionate discussion about our feelings. We upper moons so rarely get to meet, it's only natural for things to get a little heated. Be silent, Muzan snapped, his eyes flashing with disgust. He had never liked the flippant Doma. If not for the creature's absolute loyalty and immense power, he would have crushed this annoyance long ago. I have no more time to waste on this foolishness. He shot a glare at Nikame. She understood immediately. Her slender fingers plucked a rapid series of notes from her baiwa. One by one, the figures of the upper moons distorted and vanished from the Infinity Castle. After the last of them disappeared, Muzan slowly turned. A cruel, predatory fire danced in his eyes. Demon Slayer Core. Yubaya Shiki, kahihihi. Under the bright moonlight, Shinichi quietly approached the training grounds for the breath of the forest. Even from a distance, he could hear the rhythmic shouts and the sharp crack of blades slicing through the air, more coordinated and powerful than he remembered. He stood at the edge of the clearing, content to watch for a moment without disturbing them. In the center of the grounds, more than a dozen slayers were practicing their forms in unison. A palpable life force pulsed from each of them, intertwining into a collective current of energy. In this state, their speed and power were significantly enhanced, their movements flowing together with increasing harmony. At the very heart of it all, his own vitality the strongest and clearest, stood Tokito Yuichiro. The boy's posture was as straight as a pine tree, his face having shed some of its childish softness for a sharper, calmer focus. He held a Nichiren blade the color of maple leaves, but its edge flowed with an emerald green light. The life force emanating from him was like a gentle spring breeze, guiding and synchronizing the energy of everyone around him. Shinichi watched him as a wave of pride and emotion washing over him. In the short time he'd been away, Yuichiro had grown tremendously. He was managing the specialized training perfectly, he was becoming a leader. As if sensing a new presence, Yuichiro, who was deep in concentration, paused. He subconsciously turned his head toward the edge of the training grounds. His eyes met a pair of familiar amber ones, filled with a gentle, smiling warmth. For a second, Yuichiro froze completely. The Nichiren blade nearly slipped from his grasp. The serious, focused expression on his face melted away, replaced by utter, incredulous shock, which quickly morphed into immense, unbridled joy. "Master! Master!" Yuichiro's voice cracked, rising in pure excitement. In a flash, he became a blur, shooting across the training ground like an arrow and skidding to a halt directly in front of Shinichi. "Master! You're back! When did you get back?" he asked, his voice breathless and happy, his eyes wide as he looked Shinichi up and down, as if checking for any missing pieces. The other slayers stopped their training, their initial surprise giving way to smiles of relief and respect. The forest Hashira had returned. Shinichi met Yuichiro's concerned gaze and couldn't help but reach out to ruffle his student's hair. "I just got back. I'm fine, Yuichiro. Sorry to have made you worry." He glanced around the training ground at the other slayers, who stood ready but relaxed, their auras still stable and strong. He nodded in approval. "You've done well. You've trained everyone splendidly while I was gone. You're more than capable of handling things on your own." Receiving his master's praise, Yuichiro's face flushed. He scratched the back of his head, embarrassed but unable to hide the proud grin on his face. "It's only because you taught me so well, master. Everyone, they've all been working really hard." He paused, a shadow suddenly crossing his face as he remembered something. His excited energy vanished, replaced by a quiet anxiety. "Master," he asked, his voice low, "when you were out there, did you find Shinobu-san?" He didn't dare ask the rest of the question, his hands clenching into tight fists at his sides. Shinichi saw the desperate hope in his student's eyes. His own smile softened. He leaned in closer, speaking in a voice only the two of them could hear. "Don't worry. Shinobu is back, and she is safe. And Yuichiro, she never blamed you for a second. She's very, very proud of you." The tension visibly drained from Yuichiro's shoulders. A bright, relieved smile broke across his face, so wide it made his eyes water. "That's great. That's really great. Master. This is wonderful." He kept repeating the words, so overcome with joy he couldn't find any others. Please read my new fanfic, Fairy Tale Digimon Takeover. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 313, Chapter 313. In the quiet tea room, only Shinichi and Kaguya Yubayashiki sat facing each other. The air was filled with the faint, clean scent of medicine and an indescribable atmosphere of peaceful compassion. At a subtle signal from Kaguya, his wife, Amane, gave a small bow and gracefully exited the room, leaving the two of them in private. "Shinichi," Kaguya began, his voice gentle. "How is Shinobu?" Shinichi nodded, a measure of relief in his own tone. "She is doing well. The potions Lady Tamayo has developed are remarkably effective, and Shinobu herself is a brilliant medicinal master. With the two of them working together, their research is progressing at an incredible pace. It may not be long before they can create a true cure." "Lady Tamayo, yes, her presence here is a blessing," Kaguya said, a hint of hope in his voice. "Two of the world's finest medical minds working as one. Perhaps they truly can create a miracle." He seemed to be speaking not just to Shinichi, but to himself, or perhaps to fate. After a brief, contemplative silence, Kaguya shifted the topic. "Shinichi, the intelligence you brought back confirms our worst fears. The demon's infiltration runs deeper and is far more insidious than we imagined. From what we've gathered, with the help of Chinatsu-san, the current leadership of this country is vulnerable. Kaguya's tone was calm, yet carried a profound sadness. Human weakness has always been the most delectable meal for demons. Because of this, the position of our Demon Slayer Corps has become truly perilous. Cough, cough. A sudden, violent coughing fit seized him, rattling his frail body. Shinichi was on his feet in an instant. He took a step forward, his hand raised as he activated his breath of the forest. A rich, verdant vitality flowed from him into Kaguya's body. The effect on the curse was minimal, but it could, at least, soothe the pain. Oyakata-sama, your health. Shinichi left the sentence unfinished, his deep frown conveying the weight in his heart. Kaguya's condition had worsened significantly in the short time he had been away. Thank you, Shinichi. I feel much better, Kaguya breathed after a moment, the vitality easing his coughing fit. A faint hint of color returned to his pale lips, but his breathing seemed even shallower than before. Shinichi, in the days to come, you may notice some unusual changes at headquarters. No matter what happens, I need you, and all the Slayers as loyal as you, to hold fast to your beliefs. Trust that the final dawn will come. His words were slow, carrying a strange weight, as if he were giving a final testament, yet they remained infuriatingly vague. Shinichi's senses screamed that something was wrong. While the words were meant to be encouraging, they felt like a carefully constructed farewell. He felt with certainty that his lord was hiding something from him, a thought so foreign and unsettling he was reluctant to even entertain it. The Slayers' trust in their master was absolute. What could Kaguya possibly need to hide? Oyakata-sama, what do you mean by? Kaguya simply shook his head, his voice still gentle. Some things are a heavy burden to know. You only need to remember that the will of the Demon Slayer Corps, passed down for 1,000 years, will not be broken here. The cryptic words left Shinichi at a loss. Just as he was about to press further, the door slid open. Amina stepped back into the room with perfect timing. Shinichi-kun, she said, her voice soft but firm, Oyakata-sama needs his rest. You have also had a long journey. Please, go and rest as well. Seeing her, Shinichi knew the conversation was over. He swallowed the questions on the tip of his tongue and looked at the frail man being helped to lie down by his wife, his heart a tangle of worry and doubt. In the end, all he could do was bow deeply. Oyakata-sama, please take care of yourself. After Shinichi had left, Amina gently wiped her husband's brow with a cool cloth. My love, she whispered, you said yourself that Shinichi is the most trustworthy of your children. Kaguya offered a faint, sad smile. He is. They all are. And it is precisely because they trust me so completely that I cannot tell them this plan. Their trust is a beautiful, powerful thing, but I will not allow it to lead them to a needless death, trying to protect a man who cannot even swing a sword. Their lives, the lives of those who can hunt the darkness, are infinitely more precious than mine. After leaving Kaguya chambers, Shinichi felt a deep unease settling over him. He walked aimlessly through the manor, his mind replaying Kaguya's strange words. Before he knew it, he found himself standing before the temporary butterfly house. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and made his way toward the underground laboratory. As he neared the entrance, he heard a strange sound from within. It wasn't the clinking of beakers or the bubbling of potions, but a series of odd, frustrated muttering sounds. Guarding the door was Yashiro, his expression as cold and hard as ice. When he saw Shinichi, his face somehow grew even sourer, as if Shinichi had personally stolen his greatest treasure. Looking for your little butterfly. Yashiro sneered, his voice dripping with resentment. Humph, you really know how to dump your problems on others. The hostile tone caught Shinichi off guard. Yashiro, what's wrong with you? Did you eat gunpowder? It's none of your business. Yashiro snapped, then seemed to deflate slightly. Are you going in or not? If not, then get lost. Don't disturb Lady Tamayo's work. As Shinichi moved to pass him, he clearly heard Yashiro grumbling under his breath. How is that damn girl better than me? I've always been Lady Tamayo's assistant, so what if she's a toxicology expert? I can still hand her things, and she had the nerve to ask me to guard the door. Ah, so that's it, Shinichi thought while holding back a laugh. So that's what this is about. Yashiro's grumbling was so loud, it felt less like a private complaint and more like a public announcement. Was he hoping Shinichi would pass the message along? Deciding it was best to feign ignorance, he pushed open the lab door. The scene inside made him pause. The lab was more crowded than ever with glassware, distillation contraptions, and grinding tools. The air was a complex symphony of herbs and chemicals. Lady Tamayo was bent over a microscope, but it was Shinobu who captured his full attention. She was dressed in a pristine white protective suit, and she moved through the cluttered space with an impossible, otherworldly grace. Sprouting from her back were a pair of magnificent, real butterfly wings, patterned like her old Haori but shimmering with a life of their own. She used them with startling dexterity, fluttering a few feet into the air to retrieve a vial from a high shelf, their gentle movements creating no disturbance in the delicate setup below. She said, turning. A bright, cheerful smile lit up her face. Shinichi, what are you doing here? Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 314, Chapter 314. This space is bigger than I thought, was Shinichi's first impression as he stepped into the laboratory. He was right. Despite being piled high with sophisticated instruments, glassware, and research materials, the large underground room didn't feel crowded. Several huge bookshelves overflowed with medical texts and handwritten notes. On a long table in the center, an alcohol lamp burned with a quiet flame, heating test tubes filled with bubbling, multicolored liquids. Lady Tamayo stood before a microscope, her entire focus on the sample on a glass slide. She was so absorbed she didn't even notice Shinichi's arrival. The first to spot him was Shinobu, who was hovering lightly in the air near the ceiling. The moment she saw him, a bright light flashed in her violet eyes. Shinichi, what are you doing here? She chirped, landing as lightly as a butterfly beside him. I came to see how you were all doing, he said, and to ask about the research. Any breakthroughs? As she descended, Shinichi instinctively started to reach out to steady her, then quickly retracted his hand, realizing it might seem like he was treating her like a child. Shinobu keenly noticed the small, aborted movement. Her brow twitched for a fraction of a second, but her smiling expression didn't change. Ah, Shinichi-san. My apologies, I was so engrossed I didn't hear you come in, Lady Tamayo said, finally looking up from her microscope, pulled back to reality by their conversation. Not at all, Lady Tamayo. I should be the one apologizing for interrupting your important work. Nonsense, we should be thanking you. The imported equipment that Chinitsu-san provided has been an immense help, and Koko-san's expertise in toxicology is frankly astounding. Oh no, you're too kind. Ahem. Shinobu, who was standing nearby, coughed pointedly, interrupting their polite, endless cycle of humility. Get to the point. A flash of embarrassment crossed Shinichi's face, and a sweet, amused smile touched Lady Tamayo's lips. Recognizing that their time was indeed precious, she quickly updated Shinichi on their research. Most of the professional terms and chemical formulas went straight over his head. Fortunately, Shinobu stepped in, translating the complex science into simpler terms. So, you're saying it's actually possible? You can create a cure? Shinichi asked, his voice filled with awe. Lady Tamayo gave him a firm, positive nod, her expression one of profound relief. Yes. Thanks to Koko-san's help, and by analyzing Nezuko's blood, we have isolated the critical factors, the key to a demon overcoming the sun, and the key to shedding their demonic form. Of course, she added, her tone hardening, a cure alone won't be enough to defeat Muzan Kibatsuji. For him, Koko-san and I are developing something else entirely. A specialized, multi-stage poison. Hearing this, even though he was prepared for it, Shinichi was still stunned. A surge of excitement and pride washed over him. He glanced at Shinobu, who was now standing with her arms crossed in the same posture as him, and the affection in his eyes was palpable. She was still the brilliant mind he'd always admired, now armed with an entirely new perspective. Soon after, Tamayo excused herself and returned to her microscope, murmuring about a critical phase of cell evolution. With her occupied, Shinobu became Shinichi's sole guide. She had her white lab coat sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing the strange, dark purple lines on her forearms. Snap! She suddenly grabbed Shinichi's wrist. Great, you're just in time, she mumbled with a mischievous glint in her eyes. Experiment, guinea pig. And other words that didn't quite register with Shinichi. He understood soon enough. Pulling him over to a workbench, Shinobu picked up a dropper with giddy interest. She carefully squeezed a single drop of glowing blue liquid into a beaker of viscous purple fluid. Ding! She even provided her own sound effect. The next second, whoosh, gilylyla. The mixture in the beaker began to churn violently, and then exploded in a huge, colorful cloud of smoke. With lightning-fast reflexes, Shinobu tossed the still-fizzing beaker directly at Shinichi, completely enveloping him in the plume. The smoke smelled like rotten eggs mixed with expired strawberries. Cough, cough, cough. Choking, Shinichi stumbled out of the cloud, waving his arms, his face and hair dusted with a fine powder. "Shinobu, what was that? Are you just using me as a test subject for fun?" he asked, completely exasperated. Shinobu tilted her head, looking at him with clinical curiosity. "Shinichi, are you sure you don't feel anything special? Does being extremely annoyed count?" he grumbled, trying to brush the dust out of his hair. "Ah, a failure then," Shinobu sighed, sticking out her tongue, not the least bit discouraged. She picked up a notebook and began scribbling furiously. Blue fern extract had no pain-inducing effect. Perhaps I'll try dragonfly toxin next time. Shinichi just stared at her. "Are you actually trying to hurt me?" He looked at her regretful expression, clearly disappointed that she couldn't see him in excruciating pain, and felt a wave of dizziness. "Okay, please give me back the elegant, gentle, smiling Shinobu I used to know." No one mentioned a complete personality rewrite was part of the demon transformation. "It's okay, Shinichi. If that one doesn't work, I have other fun potions. Come on." Before he could protest, she grabbed his wrist again and dragged him to another table. "I don't." The words died in his throat. Her demonic strength was astonishing. He could only follow passively, feeling the cool touch of her fingertips and her boundless energy. A feeling of amused helplessness washed over him. "Slow down, Shinobu, I'm not going to run away." He would soon regret those words. Shinobu treated him like a living test dummy, trying out anesthetics, paralytics, and even a temporary blinding agent, dosing him as if he had the regenerative abilities of a full-fledged demon. Across the lab, Tamayo watched their antics, a barely perceptible smile on her lips. She spoke softly to the dazed Shinichi. "Koko-san ideas are certainly active. While her methods are unique, they have provided several new research avenues. Using potions to aid the slayers in battle, for example. Her intuitive understanding of toxins far exceeds my own expectations." Just then, Shinobu seemed to have a flash of inspiration. She yanked an empty test tube from the mouth of a nearly comatose Shinichi and flew to another corner of the lab. "Shinichi, try this one." She returned holding a small glass bottle. Inside, a liquid sparkled with fine silver light, like a swirling galaxy. "What is that?" Shinichi asked warily, a few bubbles still popping from his lips. "Don't worry, it's the good stuff," she assured him, her eyes shining. "In theory, this potion should rapidly accelerate healing, replenish stamina, and maybe even cure fatigue. Here, try it." She uncapped the bottle, ready to pour it down his throat. Shinichi yelped and scrambled backward, holding up his hands. Wait, Shinobu. That's okay. I have the forest breathing, I don't need it. Save it for someone who really needs it, like Sanemi. He's perfect. He gets covered in wounds every time he fights." What followed was a chaotic chase around the laboratory, with Shinichi dodging and weaving while Shinobu relentlessly pursued him with her miracle cure. Tamayo just shook her head, a gentle fondness in her eyes. Outside, Yashiro was pressed against the door while eavesdropping. His teeth were grinding so hard his jaw ached, a vein pulsing on his forehead. Those two idiots. How dare they disturb Lady Tamayo? Bastards, bastards, bastards. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 315, Chapter 315. "So, you finally came to see me, brother." Silence. In the dark, empty room, Muzan Kibutsuji's sharp command echoed. With a snap of his fingers, a single light flared to life, illuminating his cold, arrogant face and the wretched scene before him. His scarlet, slit-pupiled eyes looked down with utter contempt at the figure tightly imprisoned by a cage of writhing, bloody thorns. The prisoner slowly lifted his head. Messy black hair covered part of his face, but the exposed eye was a burning scarlet, hauntingly similar to Muzan's own. As the light caught his features, it revealed a face that was an almost perfect mirror of Muzan's. This was his dear brother from 1,000 years ago, Shokyu. "Haha, brother," Shokyu rasped, a weak but genuine-looking smile gracing his lips. "Seeing that smug look on your face, I take it you are close to achieving your goal. Have you found the blue spider lily?" Shokyu, Muzin's voice was ice, each word dripping with mockery. He began to walk forward, his polished leather boots making soft, deliberate clicks on the stone floor. Drop the disgusting hypocritical tone. Do you truly believe you still need to pretend in front of me? Shokyu's body was completely immobilized by the living thorns, only his head was able to move. Hearing Muzin's words, his smile didn't fade. Hypocrisy? Brother, I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean. You don't understand. Ha! Muzin sneered, stopping less than a meter from his brother. He leaned in, his scarlet eyes like abyssal pits, staring directly into Shokyu's. Don't think for a second that the pathetic stories you spin for humans can fool me. What a perfect little tale. A cruel, heartless monster of a brother, and a sincere, kind younger brother who only wants to help. TSK. You were always so good at making up stories, even when you were child. A sharp, black claw extended from Muzin's fingertip. He gently dragged the cold tip across Shokyu's cheek, leaving a wound that writhed, struggling and failing to heal against his oppressive aura. Of course, your lies have worked on countless idiots over the centuries, Muzin continued, his voice a low, vicious purr. They truly believed you were some great benefactor to mankind. I simply allowed you to survive, to scurry around like a mouse, because you were an irrelevant bug not worth my time. But now, you've delivered yourself to my doorstep. You didn't really think planting your blood in Mato and Lee would go unnoticed, did you? Shokyu's expression finally broke, shifting to one of theatrical horror, just as Muzin had expected. You, Mato and Lee. You imbecile. My evolution is absolute. Muzin suddenly backhanded him. Crack. Half of Shokyu's head exploded into a fine, bloody mist. Did you really think you could challenge me by secretly creating a few crude imitations? Muzin scoffed, watching the flesh begin to squirm and regrow. I've seen everything inside their heads. I never imagined a fool like you would actually believe those old wives' tales. The power of the underworld? Are you still trying to become a god? Even as his head was slowly regenerating, Shokyu's intact lips began to move. He sounded like a child whose greatest secret had been exposed. It seems you know everything. Good. I've wanted to tell you for so long, brother. Your vision is limited to the material world, to cells, blood, and sunlight. But that is not all there is. The master's notes were true. Yomi, the underworld, it truly exists. It is the boundary between life and death, a source of unimaginable energy. If I could only control it. Before he could finish, Muzin cut him off with a low, terrifying laugh. Shokyu, your stupidity is truly breathtaking. Stop making excuses for your failures. What I pursue is tangible evolution, quantifiable eternal life, and absolute power. Conquering the sun, achieving biological immortality, these are the true paths, based on the material world I can see and control. Not some mythological fantasy scribbled in a dead man's notebook. Shokyu fell silent, lowering what was left of his head. Muzin snorted, turning his back on him. It is time to end this meaningless conversation. This is the last time I will indulge you. I still hate you as much as I did 1,000 years ago. You, who always feigned weakness to gain sympathy. You, who always pretended to be virtuous to make me look like the monster. You, who thought you could become a god through childish fantasies. The only end for you is to watch as I become the ultimate, perfect being, and then be crushed into dust by my own hand. Without another glance, Muzin walked away. The light winked out, plunging the room back into absolute darkness and silence, leaving only the sound of faint, ragged breaths. After a long moment, a weak voice echoed in the blackness. My dear brother, you are still as simple-minded as ever. You will see, however. Mato and Lee turning so easily was unexpected. Leaving the special cell, Muzin's face was a mask of cold indifference. To him, Shokyu was just a failed experiment, an idiot who took the wrong path and dared to challenge his authority. His visit had been a final, disappointing confirmation of that fact. The power of the underworld? How could his brother's mind be so filled with such ethereal nonsense? Muzin had never believed in ghosts or gods. If they existed, why hadn't the devout prayers of his human family had any effect when he was dying as a child? Only science, only the reliable, physical evolution of this world, was a truth worth pursuing. The blue spider lily. Muzin's patience had run out. It was time to get the final answers himself. His crimson pupils gazed into the twisted void of the Infinity Castle, but what he saw was the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters being ground into dust. Oh, and that other annoyance, the Yabayashiki clan. Were they as foolish as Shokyu, attributing a simple genetic disease to some curse he had laid upon them? Pathetic. That despicable family, and everything they stood for, would be utterly erased from existence. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 316, Chapter 316. Art. I'm too tired. I can't take another step. This training is actually going to kill me. Thump. 1 No, 3 figures collapsed onto the grass almost simultaneously. It was Tanjiro Kamado, Zenitsu Agatsuma, and Inashuk Hashibira, having just survived the day's final and most brutal trial, waterfall training under the stone Hashira. They lay scattered amongst other slayers, all of them as exhausted as Shinichi's dog after a long run. I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. I'm really gonna die this time. Zenitsu wailed, his body splayed out like a starfish, his face buried in the grass. His voice, though muffled, was heartbreakingly loud. Is that giant guy even human? He has to be a demon. That wasn't training, it was attempted murder. Every single one of my bones is screaming. My soul is about to float right out of my mouth. Nezuko-chan. I need Nezuko-chan's comfort before I can even think about getting up. Hehe, just a little waterfall. Inashuk lay on his back, his boar mask tilted sideways to reveal a flushed, panting face. His chest heaved violently, but he stubbornly refused to admit defeat. I could have gone for another 3 hours. His voice dwindled, trailing off into a series of exhausted, meaningless snores. Tanjiro was just as tired as them, his muscles screaming in protest and a burning sensation accompanying every breath. But unlike his friends, he fought against the urge to collapse. He struggled into a cross-legged position and began to practice the breath of the forest, as taught by Shinichi-senpai's apprentice, Yuichiro. He guided the faint trickle of vitality through his body, trying to soothe his extreme fatigue. He looked around. There was no one left behind them. The 3 of them had lasted the longest under the crushing training of Gyomei Himejima. As the sun began to set, other slayers could be seen leaving their respective training grounds, moving in small groups, leaning on each other for support. Exhaustion was etched on every face, but not a single one of them had quit. The Hashira training, the most intense collective training in the history of the Demon Slayer Corps, was nearing its end. The process had been agonizing, but the results were undeniable. Every slayer who endured it, even if they couldn't complete every stage, had grown immensely stronger, their teamwork becoming second nature. They were like bars of black iron, hammered and quenched again and again in the furnace of the Hashira, gradually being forged into sharper, tougher blades. Just as Tanjiro was focusing on his breathing, a figure suddenly sat down beside him. How are you holding up, Tanjiro? Tanjiro looked up at the familiar voice. It was the forest Hashira, Shinichi Moriki. He immediately tried to scramble to his feet. Shinichi-senpai. Shinichi smiled and gently pushed him back down by the shoulder. Don't get up, he said, handing him a water bottle. Drink some water. It looks like Himejima-san worked you hard. Tanjiro gratefully took the bottle and drank deeply, the cool water a small relief against his fatigue. He turned to offer it to his friends, but found that both Zenitsu and Inashuk were now fast asleep, their snores harmonizing in the quiet evening. He gave up and turned back to Shinichi. Thank you, Shinichi-senpai. The training is very hard, but everyone is pushing through. I can feel it. After training with all the Hashira, I've gotten so much stronger. As he spoke, a look of genuine satisfaction shone in his eyes. Shinichi regarded the young man, his gaze full of admiration. He saw in Tanjiro an unbreakable determination to protect those he cared for, a quality Shinichi respected above all else. Keep holding on, Shinichi said gently. The physical exhaustion will fade, but the will and strength you're forging now will be your greatest assets in the battles to come. Tanjiro nodded vigorously. Then, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Shinichi-senpai, do you think we can really win? That we can defeat Muzan and end all of this? Can I really protect Nezuko? His voice was filled with a desperate hope, but underscored by a deep, gnawing anxiety. He was, after all, still just a boy, and the weight of knowing his sister was the Demon King's ultimate target was an immense burden. In the quiet moments of the night, the doubt would creep in. Shinichi didn't answer right away. He was silent for a moment, his gaze distant, fixed on the setting sun. The golden light outlined his profile, making his amber eyes glow. "Of course we can, you silly kid," he finally said, his voice soft but firm. "Nezuko isn't fighting alone, and neither are you. Protecting her is your responsibility, yes, but it isn't yours alone. All of us, the entire Demon Slayer Corps, will protect her with you. We protect each other. That's what we do, until the very end." He reached out and clapped Tanjiro on the shoulder, his hand conveying a steady, reassuring strength. "Don't get lost in your head, Tanjiro. Your nose is sharper than anyone's. You can smell good from evil, truth from lies. Trust that. Trust your friends. And trust all the effort you've poured into becoming stronger. As long as you're resolved to protect your sister and everyone else doesn't waver, your blade will never lose its way." Tanjiro listened to Shinichi's words while mesmerized, the fog of doubt and worry in his heart slowly burning away like mist in the morning sun. He wasn't alone. He had friends, comrades, and the entire Demon Slayer Corps at his back. All he had to do was what he'd always done, give it his all. "Yes, Shinichi-senpai. I understand." Tanjiro looked up, a blazing fire rekindled in his eyes, his fatigue seemingly forgotten. "Thank you. I'll work even harder. I will never give up." Shinichi couldn't help but smile at the boy's passionate, almost naive earnestness, his fighting spirit so thoroughly restored he looked ready for another round with the waterfall. Yet, as he watched the sun finally dip below the horizon, a feeling of profound unease settled in Shinichi's own heart. It was the unnatural calm of the sea just before a hurricane, a quiet that promised a terrible, world-shattering storm was about to break. The FIC will approaching the final arc soon. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 317, Chapter 317. Miss Chinatsu, with all due respect, we don't understand this sudden pivot into politics. While government support is useful, is it really worth investing this much of our energy and capital? In the grand conference room of the Moriki Group headquarters, an executive's question hung in the air, echoing the thoughts of many others present. "He's right," another chimed in immediately. "We're placing far too much emphasis on domestic affairs. At our current scale, the Moriki Group could continue expanding overseas with or without government backing." "That's foolish. Our roots are here," a third argued. "Befriending the government is necessary, but the intensity of our recent efforts seems excessive." "I don't agree. What do you know?" "Nonsense." Ryukawa Chinatsu sat silently at the head of the table, her expression unreadable as she watched her boardroom devolve into a noisy marketplace. Bang! She slammed her palm flat on the polished mahogany. The loud crack silenced the room instantly. Every executive turned, and when they met Chinatsu's ice-cold eyes, a shiver of fear ran down their spines. They had momentarily forgotten that the young woman before them was the undisputed helmsman of this corporate empire. They were advisors, but the final decision was always, unequivocally, hers. "If there is nothing else of substance to discuss, this meeting is over," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "You are free to remain here and continue your bickering, but I do not want to hear my decisions questioned again." Without another word, Chinatsu rose and swept out of the room, her bodyguards falling into formation around her, leaving a room full of stunned, silent executives in her wake. A moment later, settled in the plush back seat of her car, Chinatsu rubbed her aching temples. The constant dealings with slimy politicians and the internal friction within her own company had left her deeply exhausted. She leaned back, closing her eyes and trying to organize the chaos in her mind. The imported sedan pulled smoothly away from the headquarters, merging into the deep Tokyo night. Rain began to fall, turning the streetlights outside the window into a blurry, hypnotic smear of color. This brief moment of peace, however, was not to last. As the car turned onto a remote, poorly lit street. Crash! A deafening bang erupted as the car slammed into what felt like an invisible, solid wall. The vehicle shook violently, its tires bursting on impact. The immense inertia sent the car spinning sideways out of control, where it smashed into a concrete retaining wall with a final, sickening crunch of metal. "What's happening? What was that?" the captain of the bodyguard shouted, dazed from the collision. He kicked open his twisted door and immediately turned to check on Chinatsu. The crash alerted the second car. Several bodyguards piled out, guns drawn, and rushed towards Chinatsu's vehicle. But it was already too late. Swish! A blurry figure erupted from the shadows with supernatural speed, a phantom impossible for the naked eye to track. There was a flash of cold, gray light. The lead bodyguard froze mid-stride. A thin red line appeared on his neck, and a heartbeat later, blood gushed out like a fountain. His eyes were wide with disbelief as he collapsed to the wet pavement. Ambush! Protect Chinatsu-sama! The bodyguard captain roared. The remaining guards reacted instantly, pulling out their pistols and unleashing a frantic volley of shots at the blurry figure in the shadows. Bang! 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 Bullets tore through the rainy night, but every single one missed. The figure twisted and flickered, moving in a way that defied all laws of physics, easily evading the hail of lead. The next second, the gray form materialized behind another guard. Its fingers, sharp as scalpels, made a single, swift motion. Another man fell, clutching his throat as his lifeblood stained the ground. The surviving guards fired in a panic, their bullets like raindrops in a storm. But the figure simply strolled through the barrage, the few bullets that did hit its body only causing it to pause for a fraction of a second before continuing its unhurried, lethal advance. Despair washed over them. Inside the wrecked car, Chinatsu's face was pale, but she bit her lower lip hard, refusing to scream. Through the shattered window, she saw him standing in a pool of his own making. Gray skin, golden, slit-pupiled eyes that glowed in the dark, and a cruel, upturned smile revealing sharp fangs. It was the Upper Moon 6, Kamuro. What boring resistance! His voice floated into the car, lazy and mocking, as he casually wiped a splatter of blood from his cheek. The bodyguard captain, his gun empty, let out a furious roar. He hurled the useless pistol at Kamuro and charged, hoping to tackle him. Kamuro didn't even bother to dodge. He simply raised a hand. SHLK. His arm shot forward like the sharpest spear, punching straight through the captain's chest. The man's desperate charge came to an abrupt halt, the light in his eyes dimming rapidly. Kamuro gently withdrew his arm, letting the captain's body fall limply to the ground. He shook the blood from his hand and began walking toward the twisted car. The driver was unconscious, slumped over the wheel. Chinatsu was alone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain calm, her fingers inching toward the small pocket pistol hidden in her sleeve. Kamuro seemed to sense her intent. Through the broken window, his smile widened. He raised a finger and wagged it gently. Buzz! An invisible force slammed down, pinning Chinatsu to her seat. It felt as if shadows were reaching out from behind her, locking her body in an iron grip. Kamuro reached out, his sharp claws tearing through the car's metal door as if it were paper. He ripped the mangled door from its hinges and tossed it aside. Leaning in, he gave the immobilized Chinatsu an intimate, malicious smile. Good evening, Miss Ryakawa Chinatsu. My apologies for such a rude invitation, but I believe we need to change venues and have a proper chat. Chinatsu's pupils contracted in terror, but she was unable to move, unable to speak. Kamuro seemed to savor her fear. He chuckled, reaching in and brushing her cheek with his cold, dead fingers, making her flinch. Don't worry, he purred. I'll be gentle, until you've used up all your worth. Without another word, he pulled her from the car. He glanced around at the carnage, the dead bodyguards, the scrapped vehicles, and his eyes finally settled on a single, young guard cowering by a wheel, trembling uncontrollably, miraculously unharmed. The boy was frozen in abject terror, a dark stain spreading across the front of his trousers. A cruel, satisfied smile touched Kamuro's lips. After deliberately leaving his witness, his message, he and Chinatsu were swallowed by the boundless, waiting shadows. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 318, Chapter 318. Inside the temporary headquarters at the Moriki Manor, the study, usually filled with a faint medicinal aroma, was now thick with a solemn, cold atmosphere. Kaguya Yubayashiki, the master of the Demon Slayer Corps, sat propped against a cushion, his face was pale like a fragile mask under the lamplight. He tilted his head, listening with pained patience to the broken, sobbing report from the young bodyguard who had survived the attack. Monster, his eyes, they had words in them. So fast, everyone died. The lady, he took her. He said to tell the Demon Slayer Corps, that he wants to make a trade, for that girl. The young man was clearly broken, his mind shattered by the terror of an upper moon. Soon, the room began to fill. Shinichi, alerted by his Kashagi crow, was the first to arrive. He was followed by nearly the entire Hashira, Jiomei Haimjima, Uzui Tengen, Kyojuro Rengoku, Sanemi Shinazugawa, Jiyu Tomioka, and Tokaido Muchiro and Yuichiro and finally Sabito. Only Kanroji Mitsurai and Iguro Obanai, who were finishing their training assignments on the far side of the country, and the Koko sisters in the Butterfly House, were absent. As the horrifying details of the abduction were laid bare, a grim silence fell over the assembly. Shinichi's face was particularly dark, his expression so grim it was frightening. Kaguya's heart was heavy. He had not expected such brazen arrogance. A demon of that caliber, sneaking so close to their headquarters to abduct a crucial ally like Ryakawa Chinitsu with such overwhelming force, and then leaving a survivor to deliver a message. It was a taunt, a provocation, and a naked declaration of war. He felt a pang of regret for not providing Chinitsu with better protection, and a cold dread as he realized how the demon must have known of her importance. It confirmed Shinichi's report: the highest echelons of human society had been compromised. Damn it! Sanemi was the first to explode, slamming his fist on a nearby table, the wood cracking under the force. It's that same cowardly bastard again. Calm yourself, Sanemi, Gyomei's deep voice rumbled, filled with both compassion and a heavy sorrow. The demon's intent is to throw us into chaos. Even as he spoke, the suppressed anger radiating from his mountainous form was palpable. Trade her for Tanjiro's sister. Kyojuro frowned, his golden red eyes blazing. Never. That is the tactic of a despicable coward. It is absolutely unforgivable. Jiyu remained silent, as was his way, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop around him. The wave Hashira, Sabito, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, his own expression equally grim. Yuichiro gripped the hilt of his Nichiren blade, his face a mask of fury and guilt. The area where Chinitsu had been taken was his patrol sector. He felt this failure as a personal one. Only an ugly demon would resort to such ugly methods, Tengen said, his usual flamboyance replaced by a dark scowl. Utterly unflamboyant. Shinichi stood apart from the others, a cold light glinting in the depths of his amber eyes. He couldn't believe Komuro had dared to attack Chinitsu directly. And to demand Nezuko in exchange, this was a trap. A blatant, terrifying trap. At that moment, Kaguya, who had been silent, finally spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried an unquestionable authority that instantly commanded the attention of every Hashira in the room. The demon's goal is clear, he said steadily. And we, the Demon Slayer Corps, will give our response. Miss Ryakawa Chinitsu is our most important ally. We will risk everything to rescue her. But we will never hand over Nezuko. To do so would be a betrayal of Tanjiro, and a betrayal of all humanity. He raised his head slightly. His face was weak, but his gaze was unwavering. Shinichi. I am here, Shinichi said, stepping forward. You have faced this demon, Komuro, before. You know his abilities. I am placing you in command of this rescue operation, Kaguya stated, his voice clear and decisive. Sabito, your swordsmanship is meticulous and steady. You will provide solid support. Muchiro, your mist breathing is unrivaled for speed and stealth. You will handle reconnaissance and surprise attacks. Yuichiro, the attack occurred in your assigned territory. Your knowledge of the terrain is vital. You will assist Shinichi. Yes, Oyakata-sama. The three swordsmen responded in unison, their eyes firm. A flicker of doubt crossed Shinichi's mind. Rescuing Chinitsu was paramount, but sending 4 Hashira at once seemed like an overallocation of force. His eyes swept over the other powerful figures in the room. As if reading his thoughts, Kaguya continued calmly. Kyojuro, Sanemi, Jiyu, Tengen. Oyakata-sama, your orders. They replied as one. Komuro's attack may be a diversion. We cannot allow other demons to take advantage of the chaos. I want the 4 of you to lead a full sweep of the areas surrounding Tokyo. Eradicate any and all demons you find. Yes, sir. The 4 Hashira accepted the order without hesitation. Gyomei. Kaguya finally looked to the strongest of his children. My lord. I am leaving the safety of headquarters to you. While I rest, you will have full command. As you command, Gyomei responded, his deep voice resonating as the huge prayer beads in his hands clacked together. With the orders given, nearly every top fighter had been dispatched, leaving only Gyomei to guard the manor. Shinichi's unease intensified. On the surface, the plan was sound: a rescue team, a perimeter sweep, and a home guard. But looking deeper, it felt as if Kaguya was intentionally scattering the Corps' greatest strengths, moving them away from headquarters. But that can't be right, he thought. Hajime-san is more than capable of defending this place alone. I must be overthinking it, Shinichi muttered, shaking his head to clear the strange thoughts. He looked back at his master, but Kaguya had already tilted his head back, his eyes closed in rest. The audience concluded. Shinichi-san. Sabato's voice brought him back to the present. Yuichiro looked at his master, his expression urgent. Master, let's go. We have to find that bastard. Shinichi took a deep breath. The orders had been given. All he could do now was execute them. If anything went wrong, the other Hashira were still close enough to provide support. Let's move. Shinichi's voice was sharp, his hesitation gone, replaced by cold resolve. Sabato, you investigate from the northeast. Michiro, you take the southwest, check every shadow. Yuichiro, you're with me. We'll follow the strongest demonic trace. Everyone, stay in contact via your crows. Understood. Time to let those damn demons feel my wrath. Sanemi snarled, already turning to leave with Tengen, Kyojuro, and Jiyu at his heels. Soon, only Kaguya Yubayashiki and Gyomei Hajime remained in the study. After a long silence, Kaguya let out a soft, weary sigh, his voice barely a whisper. The time is running out. Gyomei knelt silently beside him, a stoic, immovable mountain. From the corners of his blind eyes, tears began to silently slide down his face. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 319, Chapter 319. The cold moonlight cast long, eerie shadows across the streets of Tokyo. The unnatural quiet of the block made Shinichi's skin crawl. Behind him, Sabato, Tokito Michiro, and Tokito Yuichiro moved in perfect sync. The four figures were like ghosts, flitting silently through the narrow alleyways between buildings, their presence melting into the night. Farther out, a perimeter of 30 other Demon Slayer Corps members conducted a wider, sweeping search for any trace of the demon. The hunt was not going well. It was clear that Komuro was an expert at covering his tracks. He had arrogantly left a survivor with a message about an exchange, but had named no time or place, seemingly confident that the Corps would never actually trade Nezuko for Ryukawa Chinitsu. Even for Shinichi, whose breath of the forest gave him an acute sense of life and energy, the trail was vanishing. He had followed the faint demonic residue from the ambush site to the edge of the city, but here, the weak aura was completely overwhelmed by the chaotic bustle of millions of human lives. Searching for it now was like looking for a single needle in an enormous haystack. This wasn't working. Spread out and continue the search, Shinichi ordered his team. Ask questions. The chances of a civilian seeing a demon are slim, but we can't afford to overlook anything. Keep your police identification handy to avoid trouble. Understand? Yes, Master. You can count on us, Shinichi-san. With that, the four of them split off at an intersection. Perhaps the gods were watching, because it wasn't long before they found a lead. Yuichiro was the first to report. Following his master's advice, he had questioned the owner of a late-night soba stand, who nervously recounted seeing a strange, shadowy figure vanishing into thin air in that very area several times over the past week. Almost simultaneously, a crow arrived with messages from the others. Michiro, using the incredible speed of his mist breathing to patrol the rooftops, had spotted a fleeting, demon-like shadow at the edge of the port district. Sabato, using the subtle perceptions of his water breathing, had discovered a strange, cold, non-human residue near a sewer outlet, the faint demonic trace pointing toward the city's heart. Combining the clues, Shinichi focused his own senses. He could now detect it, faint wisps of demonic energy, all being drawn toward a single point, the central district of Tokyo, where the nation's elite gathered. What is he planning? Shinichi frowned, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. An upper moon kidnaps a crucial ally, and instead of hiding in the mountains, he flees to the very center of human power? Recalling Komuro's previous warnings about corrupting the government, a deeply ominous premonition took root. Izo. He called to his Kashigai crow. Have all units converge on my position. Without waiting for a reply, he shot forward, a blur of motion racing towards the core of Tokyo. The other three, receiving the news from their own crows, immediately changed course to follow. Despite the late hour, the Ginza district was ablaze with light and activity. The entrance to the famous Shimada Hotel was a bustling hive of luxury cars and reporters. Inside and out, impeccably dressed dignitaries greeted each other with practiced smiles. The security was immense. Uniformed police patrolled the perimeter, but there were also dozens of plainclothes officers in black suits, their tough, disciplined aura and sharp eyes giving them away. They stood at street corners, sat in unmarked cars, and watched from doorways, their vigilance absolute. Just then, a long line of black sedans pulled up. From them emerged a procession of elegant men and women, their faces instantly recognizable from newspapers, politicians, senior military officers with shining medals on their chests, and the heads of Japan's most powerful corporations. From a rooftop opposite the hotel, Sabito watched with a grim expression. That's the Vice Minister of Defense. And the Chief Cabinet Secretary. The chairman of the Mitsui Group. These were the men who held the true power in the country. Shinichi's hand tightened on the hilt of his Nichiren blade. From this vantage point, he could feel the demonic aura radiating from the hotel. It was arrogant, ostentatious, practically screaming its location. Komuro wasn't hiding at all. That bastard, Shinichi growled, realizing the demon's horrifying intent. He hadn't just corrupted a few officials, he had apparently ensnared the very top of the nation's leadership. Master, what do we do? Yuichiro asked, his voice tight. Do we just charge in? To him, any human who stood between them and a demon was just another obstacle to be cut down. But as they hesitated, inside the hotel's grand ballroom, a luxurious cocktail party was in full swing. The light from crystal chandeliers sparkled on tailored suits and expensive jewelry. Waiters moved silently through the crowd with silver trays of champagne. Politicians, generals, and tycoons mingled, their quiet conversations deciding the fate of the nation. But beneath the glittering, harmonious surface, a dark and terrible undercurrent flowed. In a secluded room on the second floor, overlooking the main hall, Komuro lounged on a velvet sofa. He was disguised as a handsome, sophisticated man in a white suit and gold-rimmed glasses. His gaze swept playfully over the human elites below. On the sofa next to him sat Ryukawa Chinatsu. She was physically unharmed, her clothes still neat, but her face was pale and her eyes were cold with fury. Her hands rested on her knees, her knuckles white from the force of her grip. An invisible power held her fast, rendering her unable to move or speak. She was an exquisite, captive vase in his display. He tilted his head, giving her a smile that was all wrong. Look, Miss Chinatsu, he whispered. The center of the human world. So interesting, isn't it? These people believe they control everything. With a single word, they can send tens of thousands to their deaths in a war. With a bit of greed, they can ruin millions of lives. TSK, TSK. In their own way, they are far more terrifying than we are. It would take us demons 1,000 years to kill as many as they did in their last great war. He shook his head with feigned regret. So you see, I simply don't understand why you and your demon slayer corps are so desperate to protect them. His golden eyes locked onto hers, his smile widening. It makes me curious. Just how far will your dear forest Hashira, and the rest of his noble friends, be willing to go to save you? After all, he purred, gesturing to the powerful men below, these are the very people they are sworn to protect, are they not? Flames of helpless rage shot through Chinatsu's eyes. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't fight back. And Komuro watched her, savoring her silent, impotent fury as if he were appreciating a fine work of art. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 320, Chapter 320. Excuse me, sir. Do you have an invitation? At the hotel entrance, a waiter stepped forward to block Shinichi's path, his eyes raking over the slayer's simple haori and uniform with unconcealed suspicion. Lacking the opulent air of the other guests, Shinichi was clearly out of place and the waiter's tone held a distinct note of contempt. Shinichi wasted no time on words. He pulled a document from his breast pocket and presented it. Tokyo Metropolitan Police. We have reason to believe a kidnapper is hiding in your hotel. I need your full cooperation. Metropolitan Police. Senior Superintendent Shinichi Moriki. The waiter's eyes widened at the official-looking ID, his arrogance shifting to hesitation. On any other day, he wouldn't dare obstruct a high-ranking officer, but tonight was different. The men inside that ballroom could crush him like an ant. If this superintendent caused a scene. After a moment of frantic calculation, the waiter made his choice. He stiffened his neck and refused. Officer Moriki, our hotel is a legitimate establishment, and our clientele are all important figures. Tonight, especially, there is a private reception for some very powerful men. There are already members of the Metropolitan Police on the security detail inside. I suggest you don't disturb them. Even a senior superintendent can't afford to offend these gentlemen. Please, come back later, and we will be happy to cooperate." Shinichi's brow furrowed. He grabbed the waiter by the collar, his voice dropping to an icy growl. "Later? Do you think the kidnapper will politely wait for us? If we lose him tonight, who will guarantee the safety of the hostage? Get out of my way." "No, I can't. Please, officer, don't make this difficult." The waiter stammered, terrified by the sudden explosion of pressure from Shinichi, but still holding his ground. The commotion had attracted the attention of hotel security, as well as several large, imposing bodyguards who had been posted near the entrance. Emboldened by the reinforcements, the waiter's voice grew louder. "Please leave immediately, officer. Or we will be forced to remove you." Several security guards in black uniforms moved to surround Shinichi, their expressions hard. The private bodyguards were even more menacing, their cold eyes locked on him, ready to pounce at the slightest provocation. The atmosphere became dangerously tense. Shinichi ignored them. He glanced up, his keen eyes catching the faint, ghost-like movements of his team as they took up positions on the rooftops. "It's about time," he thought. He had no time to waste on these lackeys. Every second he was delayed put Chinatsu in greater danger. And there was no point reasoning with men who were likely already under the demon's influence. "This is your last warning. Do not interfere with my investigation." Shinichi's voice was frighteningly low. "Move. He doesn't know what's good for him." The waiter shrieked, emboldened by his perceived advantage. "Get him. He's carrying a sword, he's a threat." One of the security guards lunged, swinging a wooden truncheon at Shinichi's shoulder. Simultaneously, a bodyguard rushed in from the side, reaching to lock his arm. To Shinichi, their movements were like a snail's crawl. He didn't even draw his blade. He simply tilted his body, the truncheon whistling past harmlessly. His left hand shot out like a viper, seizing the bodyguard's wrist. With a sharp pull and a violent twist, crack, a sickening crunch of bone echoed in the tense silence. "Arg!" The bodyguard screamed as his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. He was lifted off his feet by the sheer force and thrown like a sandbag into two other guards, all three collapsing in a heap of flailing limbs. At the same instant, Shinichi's right leg lashed out like a whip, his foot connecting solidly with the first guard's abdomen. "Irk!" The man's eyes bulged, a spray of bile erupting from his mouth as he bent like a shrimp and flew backward, slamming hard against the hotel's glass doors. It all happened in the blink of an eye, so fast that the others barely had time to register it. The remaining guards and bodyguards stared in horror, some reaching instinctively for the firearms holstered at their waists. Swish! An emerald green light suddenly flared to life. Shinichi's Nichiren blade remained in its scabbard, yet a brilliant light shone from it. The pressure of his breath of the forest radiated outwards, a vast, majestic wave of tangible power. The air seemed to freeze. Every guard and bodyguard was caught in the crushing pressure, as if an invisible mountain had been dropped on them. Lifting a finger became an impossible task. They could only stare in abject terror at the terrifying green glow and the cold, amber eyes behind it. "What kind of power is this?" "Get lost," Shinichi snorted. It was as if they had been granted a pardon from the emperor. They scrambled backward, tumbling over each other in their haste to get away, their eyes wild with fear. The waiter collapsed in a heap, a dark stain spreading across his trousers. Shinichi paid them no more mind. His figure flashed, passing through the hotel entrance as if teleporting and appearing in the magnificent lobby. His sudden intrusion sent the staff and remaining guests into a panic, their screams echoing off the marble floors. His goal was clear. His senses were locked onto the two presences upstairs, the icy, demonic aura of Kamuro, and the faint, flickering life force of Ryakawa Chinatsu. He ignored the chaos around him and shot towards the grand staircase like an arrow. "Stop him!" Several bodyguards on the stairs drew their pistols. Bang! Bang! The bullets whizzed through the air, but Shinichi weaved between them without slowing his pace. Clang! One of the bullets struck the scabbard of his Nichiren blade, exploding in a shower of sparks before being harmlessly deflected. The next second, he was on the second floor, appearing before the ornate, tightly closed doors of the banquet hall. With two swift strikes from the hilt of his sword, he knocked out the guards blocking his path. Boom! Without a moment's hesitation, he channeled his breath into his leg and kicked. The heavy oak doors exploded inward as if hit by a battering ram, showering the opulent room in splinters. In an instant, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all stopped. Every movement froze, as if the world had been paused. Countless pairs of eyes, filled with shock, anger, and confusion, snapped to the figure at the entrance, clad in a demon slayer uniform, holding a gleaming, unsheathed Nicaran blade, and radiating an aura of absolute cold. Under the light of the crystal chandelier, Shinichi stood tall, his amber eyes like sharpened blades. They swept across the stunned, elegantly dressed crowd, dismissing them as irrelevant, before finally locking onto a secluded room on the second-floor balcony. There, Komuro was leaning leisurely on a sofa, an empty wine glass in his hand, a disgusting, self-satisfied smile on his face. And next to him, imprisoned by an invisible force, sat Ryukawa Chinatsu, her face pale, her eyes filled with a desperate, silent plea. "Oh my," Komuro purred, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall. "It seems our dear forest Hashira is finally here. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon." 321, Chapter 321. Insolence. Where did this ruffian come from? Guards. Where are the guards? How did he get in? After the stunned silence of Shinichi's entrance, the room erupted. These were the nation's elite, men accustomed to deference and flattery. The sheer audacity of this intrusion was an offense they could not comprehend, and their shock quickly curdled into outrage. The high-ranking military officers, in particular, shot venomous looks toward the guards posted around the room. Instantly, more than a dozen elite bodyguards, larger, tougher, and radiating a far more lethal aura than the security downstairs, emerged from the shadows, surrounding Shinichi with murderous intent. One of them had already drawn a pistol, wrapping it in a handkerchief to muffle the sound, its black muzzle aimed coldly at Shinichi's chest. Shinichi ignored them all. His gaze was locked on the figure that had now appeared at the top of the balcony stairs. He took a deep breath, and his voice, clear and sharp as a blade, cut through the angry din. "Komuro. Where is Chinatsu?" The cold question echoed through the hall. Many of the guests looked on in confusion. "Komuro? Chinatsu? As in Ryukawa Chinatsu, the business magnate? What is happening?" The crisp sound of leather shoes on wooden stairs drew their attention. The man Shinichi had named descended without haste, a bright, charming smile on his handsome face. He looked for all the world like just another guest, even taking a moment to elegantly adjust the collar of his suit. He looked down at the surrounded Shinichi as a cat would a mouse, his tone dripping with theatrical mockery. "Ah, if it isn't the esteemed Forest Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. How rude of you, intruding on such an elegant affair, and carrying such a dangerous weapon." He gestured to the Nicaran blade in Shinichi's hand. "You'll frighten the distinguished ladies and gentlemen." With those few words, Komuro masterfully painted Shinichi as a dangerous thug who had come to ruin their evening. Just as he'd intended, the glares from the powerful men in the room grew even more hostile. Demon Slayer Corps. What is that? Some illegal organization? Who is this man? Is he an acquaintance of Komuro-san? I don't care who he is. Seize him. A few of the officials who did know of the Demon Slayer Corps exchanged flickering, uncertain glances. If a Hashira was here confronting Komuro, then that meant. They quickly decided it was best not to get involved. The threat of demons was a problem for commoners. Besides, having accepted an invitation from Komuro in the first place, how many of them were truly clean? Shinichi's eyes were cold and devoid of emotion. He looked at Komuro's hypocritical face, then at the human elites who were either deceived or willingly corrupt. He felt not a shred of hope for them. "Komuro," he said, his voice as frigid as a winter wind. "I'm done wasting words. Hand over Chinatsu now, or I will cut you into 1,000 pieces." A faint green light began to glow from the hand gripping his sword as he gathered his power. The bodyguards surrounding him couldn't see the light, but they felt the pressure, an invisible weight that made the sweat bead on their foreheads and their aim tremble. "Oh?" Komuro asked with great interest. "And if I let her go, will the mighty Forest Hashira grant me mercy?" "No," Shinichi replied, his honesty brutal. "I will kill you anyway." Komuro actually chuckled at that. Just then, the bruised and terrified waiter from the entrance rushed in, a group of uniformed policemen in tow. He pointed a shaking finger at Shinichi. "Inspector Sato, that's him. He's impersonating a senior superintendent of the Metropolitan Police and trying to disrupt the party." The middle-aged Inspector Sato shot a subtle, deferential glance at the powerful guests before fixing Shinichi with a furious glare. A lunatic impersonating an officer? Arrest him. At his command, the policeman surged forward. At the same time, a fat man in a general's uniform stepped forward. Arrest him? Why bother with such a madman? He boomed. Under military law, a threat like this should be executed on the spot. His declaration was met with murmurs of approval from the other officers. Shinichi's gaze snapped to the general. As he saw the man's face clearly, he recognized him as one of the officials Chinatsu had been investigating for corruption. His pupils contracted. And there you have it, Komuro said, spreading his hands in a gesture of mock helplessness as he looked down at Shinichi's grim face. Your dilemma. As a Hashira sworn to protect humanity, how exactly do you plan to kill me when I am surrounded by the very humans you are sworn to protect? I am, after all, one of them now. He watched with keen interest, curious to see how the cornered hero would react. He didn't notice the flicker of cold, hard light that was suddenly reflected in his own golden eyes. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 322 Chapter 322. Swish. The crisp, clean sound of a sword being drawn echoed through the suddenly silent banquet hall. Shinichi brought his green Nichiren blade to bear, its tip pointed directly at Komuro. Are you ready? Shinichi's cold words cut through the air. Though surrounded by guards, pinned by dozens of angry and fearful stares, he seemed to exist in a world apart. His gaze traveled over the black muzzles of the pistols, past the smirking demon on the stairs, and swept across the so-called human elite, men in fine suits who reeked of decadence and decay. Then, just as everyone, including Komuro himself, braced for a thundering attack on the demon, Shinichi's gaze shifted. It locked onto several of the high-ranking officials and generals in the crowd. And the cold fury in his eyes was replaced by something deeper, something incomprehensible. A burning, hellish scarlet. That's right, scarlet. With a flick of his wrist, Shinichi threw his sword. The green blade, wrapped in a shimmering green aura, shot like an arrow straight at Komuro. The flying blade was the signal. Crack. The massive glass windows above Komuro's head shattered inward. Two figures, one maple red and one cyan blue, dropped into the room like lightning. Breath of maple, second form, dancing blaze slash. Breath of mist, fourth form, shifting flow slash. The blades of the Tokaido brothers, Yuichiro and Muchiro, descended in a pincer attack, instantly cutting off all of Komuro's escape routes. Further back, the wave Hashira Sabito bypassed the fight entirely, rushing toward the room where Chinatsu was being held captive. Oh my, this is unexpected. A high-powered team, all at once, Komuro mused, his voice laced with amusement as he sidestepped the initial assault. The Demon Slayer Corps truly thinks highly of me. I'm flattered. He was, however, puzzled by Shinichi, who, after throwing his sword, had simply stopped moving. What is he planning? The moment his team was in motion, Shinichi exploded. Deep within his amber eyes, the demonic blood he had kept suppressed for so long was intentionally, violently, unleashed. Boom! A wave of scorching heat erupted from him, blasting the police and bodyguards who were closing in on him backward. What's happening to him? The dignitaries cried out, stunned by the sudden turn. But something far more shocking was about to happen. Vicious, blood-red lines snaked up Shinichi's neck, crawling across his cheek like living veins. His right eye bled into a solid, demonic scarlet. The corners of his mouth tore upwards into a snarl as sharp, white fangs pierced his lower lip, dripping hot blood. Vicious claws extended from his fingertips. The vast, peaceful aura of the forest that always surrounded him vanished, replaced by a violent, demonic energy that seemed to burn the very air. Gra! A low, guttural roar burst from the depths of his throat, a sound filled not just with brutality, but with the wails of countless wronged souls. It shook the crystal chandeliers, making them tremble and chime a frantic, discordant tune. A terrifying pressure, centered on Shinichi, slammed through the room like a tsunami. The dignitaries who were too close screamed and tried to flee, some simply fainted from sheer terror. He had transformed. In full view of everyone, Shinichi, a Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, had brazenly become a demon. The scene was beyond anyone's comprehension. The human elites, Komuro on the stairs, and even Shinichi's own comrades were frozen in stunned disbelief. Master! Master! Yuichiro's eyes were wide with horror, his blade hesitating in the air as his voice cracked. The hypocritical smile on Komaro's face finally froze. The pupils behind his gold-rimmed glasses contracted, revealing genuine, unadulterated shock. He had anticipated 100 different reactions from Shinichi, but this? Turning into a demon, here, in front of the very humans he was meant to protect? Was the man insane? But they didn't know. The catalyst that had pushed Shinichi over the edge wasn't just anger at Komuro. It was a blood debt, buried deep in his soul, from another time, another life. In the flood of his past life memories, these faces, the fat general, the sinister cabinet minister, they were not just corrupt officials. Their descendants, and their ideology would soon transform into the most brutal of beasts, bringing an inhuman massacre to Asian continent. These were the executioners, the war criminals, still enjoying their champagne and celebrating their power. The sins that clung to them were fouler than any demons. A demon's evil was a curse, an instinct to survive. The evil of these men was a choice. Tonight, his actions might damn him. He might become a monster in the eyes of his own comrades. But his soul would not regret it. You're a demon. How can a demon be in the Demon Slayer Corps? A fat-headed lieutenant general shrieked, collapsing to the floor in a puddle of his own making. Shinichi's fully scarlet eyes snapped to him. So you do know of demons, he snarled, his voice a distorted rasp. Then why, General, do you associate with them? His figure vanished, leaving a sonic boom in his wake. The next second, he reappeared in front of the general. His black claws, screaming through the air, swung down without mercy. Splat! The general's massive head exploded like a watermelon hit with a sledgehammer. A grotesque firework of red and white sprayed across the horrified faces of the surrounding dignitaries. For a moment, there was dead silence. Then, the room erupted in hysterical, collapsing screams. Shinichi stood before the headless corpse, bathed in blood, his crimson eye a vortex of hell as it slowly scanned the cowering elites. Monster! Help me! Someone save me! Don't kill me! I have money! I'll give you everything! Amid the begging and screaming, a few sporadic gunshots rang out, the bullets having no effect. The police inspector, Sato, had long since fled with his men, locking the ballroom doors from the outside, a cowardly act that had, ironically, trapped Shinichi's prey for him. His scarlet eye locked onto an old cabinet official trying to secretly draw a pistol. Swish! The claws flashed again. The man's arm, along with the gun in his hand, was severed at the shoulder. Blood gushed as he fell to the ground, howling like a slaughtered pig. Shinichi was a tiger loosed upon sheep. His demonic form weaved through the panicking crowd. Every flash of his claws brought a spray of beautiful, tragic crimson and a desperate scream. He wasn't massacring them indiscriminately. Like a surgeon of vengeance, he was targeting specific individuals, those whose faces he remembered from his past life, those whose auras of corruption were the strongest, those who still tried to fight back. Broken limbs, shattered bones, and splattered blood transformed the magnificent ballroom into a hellish abattoir. On the second floor, Komuro had melted back into the shadows, easily evading the Tokaido brothers' attacks. The initial shock on his face was gone, replaced by an expression of profound, complex fascination, a mixture of amusement, awe, and an almost academic appreciation. What an unexpected development, he murmured to himself, his eyes flickering with a strange light as he watched the demonic Hashira systematically dismember the leadership of Japan. Shinichi Moriki, what in the world could possibly make you this angry? Note, Shinichi was angry at the army general's cause in his past life. This same people is the one who ordered a massacre on China, Nanjing massacre. I change it to whole South and Southeast Asian instead. 323, Chapter 323. How dare you get distracted? A maple red light flared from the Nichiren blade in Yuichiro's hand. Seeing that this creature still had the audacity to watch his master's transformation while in the middle of a fight, Yuichiro's rage boiled over. I don't know what's happened to Master, or why he's suddenly taken that form, he thought, his resolve hardening. But he is my master. He must have his reasons. That's all that matters. Breath of Maple, third form, autumn's first leaf. At the same instant, Muichiro attacked, his blade became a blur. The movements of his mist breathing were so fast they left no afterimage, his sword arriving at Komaro's neck a fraction of a second before his brother's. Oh, what two impatient children, Komaro grinned, finally making his move. Blood demon art, pseudo-darkness. His body seemed to ripple and distort. From his chest and back, two gray, shadowy, humanoid figures suddenly erupted. The blades flashed. Breath of water, first form, water surface slash. Breath of wind, second form, purifying wind claws. Gray energy slashes met their attack. A gray wind claw parried Michiro's blade, while a gray water slash deflected Yuichiro's. What? The Tokaido brothers' eyes widened in unison. Kamuro had used breathing techniques against them? No, that wasn't right. The forms were perfect, but the feel of them was wrong. Looking closer, they saw the two writhing gray shadows attached to Kamuro's body, each holding a black, knife-like weapon. Those shadows, they were the ones who had launched the attacks. The look of pure shock on their faces was clearly to Kamuro's liking. It is well known that the Upper Moon 6 is the weakest of the lot, isn't it? He thought mockingly. The Demon Slayers think so. The other Upper Moons think so. It is such a useful reputation. As much as I dislike fighting, I suppose I should take today's mission seriously, Kamuro purred, a teasing glint in his eye. After all, one must respect the requests of that adult. Without another word, he rushed toward the still-stunned Yuichiro. Snap! Casually tossing aside a severed head, its eyes still wide with terror, the demonized Shinichi bared his fangs at the other screaming humans. The magnificent ballroom had become a true hell on earth. The air was thick with the coppery stench of blood, making it hard to breathe. Broken limbs were strewn across the fine carpets, mingling with spilled wine and shattered crystal. Painful groans, devastating cries, and desperate pleas for mercy filled the air. Shinichi stood at the center of the carnage like a devil born from a pool of blood. The scarlet demonic energy swirling around him had not yet subsided, and blood dripped from his fangs and claws, hitting the floor with a heart-stopping tick, tick, tick. At his feet lay more than a dozen mangled corpses and even more wounded, wailing in agony. It looked like a massacre, but in truth, he had been surgically precise. He hadn't killed indiscriminately. He had used methods of extreme, terrifying cruelty to break the will of his very specific targets. From the beginning, his targets had been clear: the military hardliners and cabinet fanatics who, in his memories and from information Ryakawa Chinatsu had let slip, were the greatest obstacles to the Moriki group's efforts to support the Demon Slayer Corps. Just then, Shinichi! An anxious, disbelieving cry came from the second-floor balcony. It was Chinatsu. She had been freed by Sabito, who now stood beside her. She gripped the railing, her face deathly pale as she stared down at the Hell's Gate below, at the familiar yet monstrously alien figure of Shinichi. Oh, it seems my little spell has been broken, Kamuro thought, as he pressed his attack on Yuichiro. Congratulations, Miss Ryakawa Chinatsu. You are free. Beside her, Sabito also took in the bloody scene, his normally calm expression shattering. Even for a Hashira, the sight of his comrade, radiating a demonic aura and standing amidst such butchery, was a shock that struck him to the core. Shinichi-san, what are you doing? Satsuki's voice was filled with confusion. Please, calm down. We have Miss Chinatsu, she's safe. Our target is the demon. Don't let your anger consume you. Hearing his friend's plea, Shinichi slowly turned his head, his single scarlet eye fixing on Sabito and the pale-faced Chinatsu. The moment their eyes met, Chinatsu's heart stopped. Shinichi's eye, it wasn't the wild, out-of-control gaze she had expected. Deep within the crimson inferno, there was a shocking, lucid clarity. And something else, a silent, meaningful question. In that instant, a series of images flashed through her mind. A conversation from not long ago, just after the Hashira training began. She had been venting to Shinichi in private, complaining about her struggles to gain influence with the government. Those stubborn old men in the military are impossible. Especially Yamamoto and Nakagawa in the army department. All they can think about is some insane expansionist plan, the East Asia Co-Prosperity 21. They obstruct every proposal we make. And the finance minister's man, Counselor Hashimoto, is a greedy, short-sighted fool. He only cares about lining his own pockets. And General Fujita, the head of national security, is so paranoid about any group without a military background that he's blocking the Moriki group at every turn. At the time, she was just complaining. She never expected him to act on it. But now, her eyes suddenly swept across the dead and dying on the floor below. The lieutenant general with the exploded head, that was General Yamamoto. The cabinet official clutching the stump of his severed arm, that was Counselor Hashimoto. The old man with a gaping hole in his chest, barely breathing, that was General Fujita. And the others, the ones who were severely injured, nearly all of them were the men who had stood in her way. Shinichi. She breathed, a horrifying, unbelievable realization dawning on her. You. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 324, Chapter 324. The Moriki Manor, temporary headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps. The night was as dark as ink, the cold moonlight veiled by thin, ominous clouds. A damp chill hung in the air, causing dew to condense on the leaves in the courtyard, dripping with a soft, lonely patter that only amplified the silence. It was a stark, unsettling contrast to the usual activity. Normally, even late at night, the headquarters would be alive with the light of lanterns and the sounds of slayers patrolling or training. Tonight, it was plunged into an unnervingly cold and profound quiet. It was too quiet. Unnaturally so. Every corps member who had completed the Hashira training, even those who were injured, had received special instructions from their master, Kaguya Yubayashiki, that evening. Under various pretexts, rest and recuperation, peripheral reconnaissance, assisting in a logistics transfer, they had been quietly and methodically moved out of the manor's core area. Even the majority of the Kakushi, the logistical support teams, had been sent away, leaving only a skeleton crew at key positions. The vast estate had been turned into a quietly emptied stage, waiting. The only ones left were the core actors and an invisible, but ever-strengthening, aura of doom. Deep in the main house, in the room filled with the scent of medicine, Kaguya Yubayashiki sat calmly by the window. Though his face was scarred and his eyes were nearly blind, he was turned toward the silent courtyard as if he could still see it. His wife, Amane, knelt beside him, her slender hands clutching his, which were cool to the touch. She fought to maintain her composure, but the slight tremble of her fingertips and the deep, inconsolable sorrow in her eyes betrayed the storm in her heart. Their twin daughters, Hinaki and Nichika, seemed to sense the oppressive atmosphere. They were snuggled obediently against their parents, not playing or chattering as they usually would, their wide, clear eyes filled with a quiet confusion. "Father," Hinaki asked, her small voice startlingly clear in the silent room, "where did everyone go?" Kaguya reached out a pale, thin hand and gently stroked his daughter's hair. His voice was as warm and gentle as the spring sun. "They have gone on a very important mission, my dear. They will be back. Are you getting sleepy? Mommy can take you to bed now, all right." It was a lie. A gentle, beautiful, and utterly cruel lie. Amane closed her eyes as a single tear escaped and traced a silent path down her cheek. She knew. Her husband, the master of the Demon Slayer Corps, had made his final decision. He was using himself, his family, and this entire manor as bait. He was setting a final, merciless death trap for Kibutsuji Muzan. All the slayers had been sent away to preserve the last spark of hope for the Corps. Their family, they would be the heart of the trap. And their son, Kiriya, would be the one to carry that spark into the future. The air was thick with a tragic, suffocating silence, the last calm before the end of the world. At that same moment, in the secret laboratory beneath the manor, Shinobu Koko's hands began to shake uncontrollably. Crash! A glass test tube slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She ignored the pungent chemical smell that filled the air. Her head snapped up, her violet eyes flashing with alarm. Just now, she had felt something. It wasn't a sound, but a sharp, primal perception that had only awakened after her transformation. A deep, instinctual palpitation that signaled the approach of extreme, overwhelming danger. A cold, suffocating malice was seeping into the air like an invisible tide. This feeling. Shinobu pressed a hand to her chest, her instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. She looked around the lab and realized with a jolt that Lady Tamayo and Yashiro had been gone for a long time. Where were they? And outside, it was so quiet. Eerily quiet. Where were the footsteps of the patrols? The shouts from the night training grounds? Even the chirping of the insects had ceased. Suddenly, she remembered hearing the Kakushi whispering earlier in the evening about a large-scale field mission and headquarters martial law. At the time, she had paid it no mind. But now, combined with this dead silence and the growing dread in her soul. No, this is not normal. Her expression hardened. She had to find out what was happening. She moved to leave the lab, intending to find Tamayo or go straight to the main house to check on her master. But as she reached the door, she found her path blocked. A figure as majestic and unmovable as a mountain stood there, radiating an aura of profound sadness and determination. It was Gyomei Haimjima. the strongest Hashira. But why was he here? And why did his face hold such a look of solemn, tragic resolve? Himejima-san. Thank goodness, Shinobu said, her voice laced with anxiety. Something is wrong. I can feel it. Please, come with me to Oyakata-sama, we have to ensure his safety. Gyomei did not seem to hear her. He simply turned, his movements slow and deliberate. His tear-stained, resolute face was filled with an endless compassion, and a deep, unspoken apology. He slowly shook his head, his eyes conveying a message of gentle but absolute refusal. He's stopping me. Why? The horrifying answer began to dawn on Shinobu. Kaguya had transferred all the slayers away. Gyomei was standing guard alone. This was all part of a plan. Her master hadn't just anticipated this. He had orchestrated it. He was using himself as bait. Just as the devastating realization struck her, causing her to hesitate for a fatal second. In front of the main house, where Kaguya Yubayashiki waited, the space began to ripple and distort. A figure, like death itself stepping out of the abyss, slowly materialized from thin air. He wore an exquisite, modern suit, his skin unnaturally pale, his hair as black as ink. His face was handsome, almost inhumanly so. But his eyes, his scarlet, slit-pupiled eyes, held nothing but a cold, absolute indifference, as if he were gazing down upon ants. Kibutsuji Muzan. He had come in person. His gaze instantly shot across the courtyard, locking onto the main house, onto the source of the Yubayashiki bloodline he had despised for 1,000 years. The corner of his mouth curled into an expression of cruel, triumphant joy. I've found you. Kaguya Yubayashiki. His cold voice, a declaration of death, echoed through the silent night. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 325, Chapter 325. Inside the banquet hall, the reek of blood and fear was a thick, suffocating presence, weighing on the nerves of every survivor. Shinichi stood leaning on his sword, his single scarlet eye still scanning the scene, a hunter counting his kills. No one dared to meet his gaze. After a moment, his eyes settled on a shivering figure huddled beneath an ornate dining table. It was a middle-aged man in a high-ranking official's attire, his meticulously combed hair now disheveled. Shinichi stared at the man's distinguished face, his own expression unreadable. He knew that beneath that respectable veneer, the seeds of an unforgivable sin had been deeply sown. Killing intent flared once more in Shinichi's eyes. He slowly raised his Nichiren blade. Though the tip trembled slightly, it pointed with deadly certainty at the man under the table. He lunged, shattering the table and grabbing the man, who immediately let out a desperate, animalistic howl. No, please, let me go. I'll give you anything you want. Shinichi, stop. Seeing Shinichi about to kill again, Sabato could no longer stand by. He rushed forward, his hand clamping down on Shinichi's wrist like a vice. Enough, Shinichi-san. He pleaded, his eyes sweeping over the carnage. He saw the bodies, the blood, and the once powerful men who were now broken and wailing like lambs for the slaughter. A deep, horrified pity filled him. They are human, not demons. Even if they have sinned, this is not our place. This is a massacre. As a master of the water breathing, a deep-seated integrity and compassion was at his core. He could kill demons without hesitation, but to see his own kind butchered so brutally touched a fundamental nerve. Shinichi slowly turned his head, his scarlet eye meeting Sabato's. There was no rage or defensiveness in his gaze, only a calm, unbreakable resolve that his friend could not comprehend. Sabato, let go. Shinichi's voice was a hoarse rasp. Why? Sabato's grip tightened. He stared into Shinichi's demonic eye, desperately searching for a flicker of the calm, reliable forest Hashira he knew. Even if they deserve to die, it shouldn't have been by your hand. This path will lead you straight to hell. Wake up. Seeing the genuine pain and worry in Sabato's eyes, Shinichi's heart wavered for a fraction of a second. But then the bloody memories of the past, and the vision of the obstacles Chinatsu would have to face, hardened his resolve once more. There are hells that someone has to go to. There are sins that someone must bear. I don't regret it, Shinichi said, his voice quiet but absolute. Believe me, Sabato. I am doing this to save more lives. He tried to pull his arm free, but Sabato held fast. Just as they were locked in their stalemate. Clap, clap, clap. A series of clear, playful applause echoed from the shadows in the corner of the hall. Every head snapped in that direction. On the second floor, Yuichiro and Muichiro wore expressions of deep frustration. They were Hashira, yet their target had slipped from their grasp. Truly, brilliant, Forest Hashira-sama. Kamaro's voice, filled with sickening admiration, slithered from the darkness. Decisive, ruthless, precise. It even possessed a certain, cruel aesthetic. You have once again completely overturned my perception of you. Be silent, demon. Sabito roared, instantly releasing Shinichi as his focus shifted to the true enemy. A deep blue aura flared around his blade. Oh, don't be so excited, wave Hashira-sama. Kamaro waved a dismissive hand, as if placating a noisy child. My mission here is complete. I merely wished to say farewell and express my sincere admiration for the Forest Hashira's outstanding performance. His gaze swept over the terrified survivors. Tisk, TSK. After tonight's restructuring, I believe Miss Ryakawa's work will proceed much more smoothly, don't you? Hearing this, Ryakawa Chinatsu, who had been watching in silent horror from the balcony, turned deathly pale, her fingers gripping the railing until her knuckles were white. Kamaro seemed to suddenly remember something, slapping his forehead in mock surprise. Oh, my. Look at my memory. I was so enthralled by the show, I almost forgot the most important part. A slow, eerie smile spread across his face. In a voice that was both soft and blood-chilling, he spoke. While you were all so very busy here, has anyone noticed that the communications from your headquarters seem to have gone silent? Shinichi's and Sabito's pupils contracted. Their hearts plunged. Kamaro savored their expressions. If one calculates the time, he continued in that same creepy, leisurely tone. Muzan-sama and his loyal upper moons should have arrived by now. I do wonder how long your defenseless little base can possibly hold out. What did you say? Sabito cried out in shock. The headquarters was under attack by Muzan and the upper moons. But nearly all the Hashira had been sent away. How could it be such a coincidence? Wait. The pieces slammed together in Shinichi's mind with sickening force. Kaguya's strange orders. The scattering of their forces. It wasn't a mission, it was a clearing of the field. It's a trap. And he is the bait. Well, it seems my work here is done, Kamaro chuckled. I wouldn't want to get in the way of your family matters. If I don't leave now, those two boys on the balcony might actually manage to hit me. Breath of maple. Breath of mist. As the Tokaido brothers lunged again, Kamaro's figure blurred, melting back into the shadows an instant before their blades could find purchase. I do hope. His disembodied voice whispered through the hall, laced with a final, vicious taunt. That you make it back in time, to collect the bodies. Headquarters. Oyakata-sama. We're leaving. Now. The scarlet in Shinichi's eye receded, replaced by desperate, amber clarity as his demonic features faded. He dropped the terrified official he was holding and turned to his comrades. Sabito reacted instantly, his mind racing. He gripped his sword and fell in beside Shinichi. They had to go back. They had to get back now. Chinatsu, who knew of Kaguya's plan, understood their panic completely. Shinichi, not the main gate. She called out, her voice sharp and commanding. This place will be swarming with police and soldiers in minutes. Come with me. When that monster captured me, I found a secret passage. That night, Tokyo's elite class suffered a bloodbath that would reshape the nation's future. And miles away, the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters faced the deadliest crisis in its 1,000-year history. Time was running out. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 326, Chapter 326. The night was as dark as ink. The path leading to the manor's main house was spacious and grand, yet at this moment, a single, oppressive figure walked its length as if strolling through a garden. With every step the man in the well-tailored suit took, the terrifying aura emanating from him intensified, a disturbing energy that seemed to condense into a physical presence, causing his coat to rustle in the windless air. To face him was to face the abyss itself, for he was the master of all demons, the beginning of all evil, the Demon King, Kibutsuji Muzan. Yet, at the center of this storm of pressure, the brightly lit main house of the Moriki Manor exuded a strange, almost tragic calm. Muzan's scarlet eyes paused, noticing two small figures by the entrance. They were delicate little girls with white hair, and they radiated an aura that he instinctively disliked. Yubayashiki's children? Strangely, the two girls seemed not to see him at all. One held a wooden box, the other a handful of paper talismans. With faint, sweet smiles on their faces, they quietly walked into the main house, completely ignoring the ancestor of all demons standing mere feet away. Interesting, Yubayashiki. Truly interesting, Muzan mused, his hands in his pockets. His gaze seemed to pierce the walls, locking onto the faint but unmistakable scent of the bloodline he had loathed for 1,000 years. He slowly raised a foot, his shiny black leather boots tapping crisply on the moonlit stone steps. His pace was elegant and unhurried, as if he were not arriving to annihilate his mortal enemy, but to keep a date a millennium in the making, a rendezvous destined to end in blood. In an unseen corner, a special talisman stuck to his forehead, Gyomei Heimjama's massive body was tense, the muscles of his arms bulging around his prayer beads. Seeing Muzan draw ever closer to his master, he lowered his head with a silent prayer on his lips. Namo Amida Butsu. Muzan reached the main house and saw the door was slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for him. Warm light spilled out, a stark contrast to the cold, deathly aura clinging to him. He stopped, tilted his head, and then raised a hand. With a flash of his claws, the heavy wooden door disintegrated into splinters. The light washed over him, and he frowned in displeasure. The scene within was now clearly visible. His scarlet gaze finally fell upon the figure half reclined by the window. As if sensing him, Kaguya Yubayashiki slowly lifted his bandaged face, turning toward the doorway. Though his vision was a hazy fog, he could still perceive the nightmarish silhouette that had haunted his family for generations. Beside him, Amini held her husband's hand, her own palm slick with sweat despite her placid expression. After a moment of silence, a sneer of pure, undiluted contempt escaped Muzan's lips, a sound like shards of ice grinding together. He took a step, crossing the threshold and entering the room. The warm atmosphere seemed to recoil from his chilling presence, making an almost inaudible hissing sound. You are a pathetic sight, Kaguya Yubayashiki. Even uglier than I imagined. Muzan's voice was low, yet it carried a soul-piercing coldness. So weak. Even without my intervention, you have only a few years left. What a pitiful creature. His eyes swept over Kaguya's decaying face and the room that smelled of medicine and death, his joy unconcealed. You've hidden in your gutter for so long, and yet you still can't escape your fate. How utterly ridiculous. Faced with this venomous tirade, Kaguya showed no trace of anger or fear. He simply twitched the corners of his mouth into a faint, impossibly peaceful smile. Kibutsuji Muzan, Kaguya's voice was gentle and clear, like a mountain spring, strangely soothing the tense air. You are finally here. He spoke not like a victim, but like a host who had been patiently awaiting a long overdue guest. Muzan's brow furrowed. This was not the reaction he had expected. Oh, you don't seem surprised, he purred, slowly advancing into the room. Is this why you sent your little slayers away? Did you intend to make one last, futile struggle with your own rotten life? Or did you naively believe you could save them? He spat the words, trying to tear through the other man's infuriating calm. Kaguya's smile remained. A struggle? Perhaps, he said softly. The sole purpose of the Yubayashiki clan for 1,000 years has been to see you destroyed. Whatever the cost, we have never once regretted it. He lifted his head slightly, and though his eyes were clouded white, they seemed to look straight into Muzan's soul. But you, Muzan, you have lived for more than 1,000 years, devouring countless lives. And for what? So you can achieve an eternity of hiding in the shadows, constantly changing your identity, living like the most despicable parasite in human society. Muzan's advance stopped dead. The lazy mockery on his face vanished, replaced by a cold, ferocious killing intent. Kaguya seemed not to notice. What is it you truly desire? To walk in the sun? Or is it simply an escape from the fear of death that torments you day and night? You are afraid, aren't you? I can sense it. Your anger proves I am right. You have a sharp tongue, for a dying man, Muzan hissed, his demonic energy surging, causing the temperature in the room to plummet and the floor beneath his feet to crack. But Kaguya was unmoved. Look at yourself, Muzan, he continued, his voice now laced with a profound pity. 1,000 years have not made you perfect. They have not even made you truly alive. You are an empty shell, driven only by your fear of death, endlessly consuming but never satisfied. You hate the sun, you hate the wisteria, you hate us, because you hate your own imperfections. Your so-called strength is merely a mask for your cowardice. You are the most pitiful creature to have ever walked this earth. Every word was a perfectly sharpened blade, honed over generations, slicing through Muzin's layers of pride and power to pierce the one ugly truth he could never face. Silence. Muzin roared, his crimson eyes blazing with unrestrained murder. The pressure in the room became a physical force, threatening to crush Kaguya and everything around him into dust. He admitted it to himself, the man's words were truly, infuriatingly, precise. He had to be silenced. But not yet. Not by simply crushing him like an ant. The game had to be played to its end. He reined in his power, a cruel smile returning to his face. Pathetic man. What gives you the right to be so calm in front of me? 327, Chapter 327. Muzin's killing intent, sharp and cold as an icicle, was meant to pierce Kaguya Yubayashiki and tear his frail body apart. But the expected immediate destruction never came. The monstrous pressure halted just inches from its target. The ferocity on Muzin's face slowly receded, replaced by a deeper, more playful cruelty. Haha, you pathetic man. What gives you the right to be so calm? Muzin let out a low, sarcastic chuckle and shook his head, as if he had just witnessed something utterly absurd. Kaguya Yubayashiki, even now, you're still trying to provoke me with empty words? Trying to defend your pitiful, worthless dignity? Are you not afraid that I will tear you limb from limb? As he spoke, Muzin took another step forward, the sound of his boots on the floorboards sharp and clear in the tense silence. The Yubayashiki family has borne this burden for 1,000 years, Kaguya replied, his voice still impossibly calm. Every one of us has long been prepared for death. Burden? You mean your curse? Muzin's tone was filled with pure, undiluted contempt. That so-called curse your clan has whined about for generations. How ridiculous. His voice suddenly rose, sharp and scolding. You fool. There is no such thing as an illusory curse. It is nothing more than an inferior genetic disease. A flaw inherent in your pathetic bloodline. A fatal error in your genetic code. It just so happened to manifest in the same era as my own perfect evolution, and you ignorant ants blamed it on me? How utterly foolish. Muzin's scarlet eyes looked down on him, his gaze that of a scholar explaining a simple truth to a child. Look at yourself, Kaguya. Blind, your organs failing, your body decaying at an accelerated rate. Is this the power of a curse? No. This is biological elimination. It is the inevitable outcome of your inferior genes. You have twisted your impotent rage over your own flawed existence into a millennium-long hunt for a superior being. That, in itself, is the greatest joke of all. Muzin's words were a vicious, clinical assault, an attempt to use the cold logic of science to render the Yubayashiki clan's 1,000-year sacrifice meaningless. Kaguya listened quietly, his expression unchanged, though the pity in his aura seemed to deepen. Whether you call it a curse or a genetic disease, he said slowly, his voice steady. Muzin, it began with you. It is a sickness born from your sin, your desecration of life. Sin. Muzin laughed as if it were the funniest word he had ever heard. What sin is there in pursuing perfection? In the grand scheme of evolution, the weak are meant to be eliminated. His voice suddenly turned sly and taunting. And you, a rotting creature, have stalled for so long. Do you truly think I don't know what you are planning? He tilted his head, a cruel arc playing on his lips. You lured me here, thinking you could overcome the chasm in our power with a few cheap tricks. Kaguya Yubayashiki, do you take me for an idiot? Under this house, and all around it, there are quite a few interesting things buried, aren't there? That disgusting stench of wisteria mixed with something explosive. You've gone to a great deal of trouble. He knows. Emily, who had remained so composed, felt a jolt of pure shock. In stark contrast to his wife's reaction, Kaguya simply raised his head with difficulty. You knew. Of course, Muzin sneered. From the moment you deliberately leaked your location, I knew it was a trap. A dying man suddenly stops hiding, a pathetically obvious bait. But I came anyway. Do you know why? He leaned forward, his voice a triumphant whisper. Because in the face of absolute power, any strategy is meaningless. I am here to personally extinguish the last embers of your hope. Before you die, you will understand that your struggle, your sacrifice, and your pathetic ideals, will become nothing more than an insignificant footnote in my eternal life. But even as Muzin was gloating, enjoying the prelude to his praised despair, several figures were racing through the distant night sky, converging on the manor. The Hashira, having received the highest level summons, were burning with all their strength and will, their hearts pounding in their chests. The message from the crows had been simple and horrifying. Muzan at headquarters. Faster, was the only thought in their minds. We must get to our master's side. Back in the main house, in a moment completely out of tune with the doomsday atmosphere, the small door to the study was gently pushed open. Two small heads peeked out. It was Hinaki and Nichika. Sweet, innocent smiles were on their faces as they carefully carried a small box. Inside was a simple, slightly crooked buttercream cake, with a few small candles flickering tenaciously upon it. Today was Kaguya Yubayashiki's birthday. Even in this final, desperate hour, his children remembered. They showed no fear, only a quiet determination to give their father this small gift, this symbol of life and love. Happy birthday, father. Muzan turned to watch this scene, a strange, unreadable expression in his eyes with a flicker of confusion beneath layers of contempt. Oh, what a touching display, he sneered. In the final moments of your life, you still cling to these ridiculous rituals? Celebrating that your decaying body is one step closer to complete collapse. Kaguya did not look at Muzan. His gaze was fixed in the direction of his daughters. He couldn't see them, but he could feel the warmth of the candles, and the pure, unconditional love in their hearts. The calm, serene smile on his pale face suddenly became real, and soft. He didn't respond to Muzan's taunt. He simply inclined his head and said in the gentlest voice imaginable, "Thank you, Hinaki, Nichika. The cake smells delicious." This simple, beautiful moment was something Muzan could not comprehend. In the face of absolute power and imminent oblivion, what meaning could such an insignificant emotion possibly have? And that meaningless feeling was precisely the reason Kaguya Yubayashiki and the Demon Slayer Corps had fought for 1,000 years. In that instant, the last shred of hesitation in Kaguya's heart vanished. He knew the Hashira were on their way. He knew Muzan was in the center of the trap, his arrogance having blinded him. The timing was perfect. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 328, Chapter 328. Yubayashiki, my patience is at an end. I have no more time to watch this disgusting, sentimental play, Muzan hissed, his voice dropping to a deadly cold. His claws and fangs began to extend unconsciously, a sign that his surging murderous intent was about to break its leash. I will give you one chance. Hand over the demon girl, and I will grant you and your Demon Slayer Corps a swift end. But Kaguya Yubayashiki paid him no mind. He took a slow, rattling breath, the simple movement causing his frail body to shudder. He raised a hand and gently, lovingly, stroked the hair of his two daughters. When he looked up again to face Muzan, all the gentleness was gone, replaced by a divine, unwavering resolve, the calm of a man ready to walk into hell with his enemy. Kibutsuji Muzan, Kaguya's voice was low, yet it carried across the room with perfect clarity. You are cruel. You despise life and deny all emotion. You, an immortal creature, will never understand the brilliance of the humanity you so loathe, a brilliance as faint, yet as defiant, as a candle's flame. You can never possess it. Your only destination is the underworld. That sentence was the spark that lit the fuse. Muzan's pupils constricted. All the teasing, all the mockery and contempt, vanished, replaced by the most primal, incandescent rage. You are begging for death. The destructive power he held in check was finally unleashed. No, Kaguya Yubayashiki said, his voice impossibly calm. We die together. And then, the world erupted in fire. An apocalyptic heat surged from beneath the floorboards, which cracked and splintered as crimson flames roared to life. In an instant, a blinding, incandescent light devoured everything, as if a tiny sun had been born within the manor. A massive fireball of unimaginable heat and power expanded in a perfect, annihilating sphere. The main house, built to stand for centuries, was vaporized in a fraction of a second. The study, the books, the little birthday cake, all of it was annihilated by the extreme light and heat, leaving not even ash behind. Then came the sound, a deafening, delayed roar that was less a noise and more a physical blow. The entire Moriki manor and the very ground for miles around, shook violently. A devastating ring of fire and force, mixed with dirt, gravel, and the indescribable stench of incineration, swept outward from the epicenter, painting half the night sky a bloody, terrifying red. This was the final gift Kaguya Yubayashiki had prepared for Muzan. Not a clever trap or a masterful sword technique, but the purest, most violent weapon of the modern age, a massive quantity of explosives, all of it laced with a concentrated wisteria poison. Kaguya had turned his own home into a tomb, all for the 1 in a million chance to die with his enemy. The terrifying explosion lit up the night, visible for miles. However, just before the destructive energy consumed everything, as Muzan was about to be engulfed by the white-hot light, a single, cold command cut through the roar. Nakame. Clang. The sharp, resonant twang of a biwa string somehow pierced the deafening blast. Beside Muzan, space distorted like the surface of a pond. A simple wooden door, edged in blood red, materialized out of thin air, the dark, eerie corridors of the Infinity Castle visible beyond it. There was no shock or rage on Muzan's face. Only an extreme, cold calm, and a hint of mocking anticipation. He had been waiting for this. Yubaya Shiki, I told you I knew all your pathetic tricks, his voice echoed in the final moments. Now, I wonder if you'll regret this, burning alone in your self-made hell. With supernatural speed, Muzan retreated into the spatial doorway. Yet, as he looked back at the family about to be consumed by the inferno, he saw no panic. Kaguya Yubaya Shiki was gently holding the hands of his wife and daughters, and on his face was a serene, satisfied smile. This madman. He is an absolute idiot, was Muzan's final thought as the door to the Infinity Castle vanished. The next moment, the incandescent fireball engulfed the space, its power so immense it vaporized even the lingering phantom of Nakame's blood demon art. The shockwave continued to rage, carving a smoking, charred crater hundreds of feet wide where the main house once stood. In the distance, the winged Hashira Sanemi witnessed the pillar of fire shoot into the sky. For a moment, his heart stopped beating. Raw, agonizing grief contorted his scarred face. Oyakata-sama. At the edge of the newly formed crater, the air rippled like water. Muzan Kibutsuji stepped out, completely unscathed, his suit not even wrinkled. His pale face held an expression of detached contempt for the Yubayashiki clan's final, futile gesture. Foolish. He began to say, ready to mock the still-burning pyre. But his words were cut short. Namu Amida Butsu. Muzan. A roar like that of an enraged guardian king, filled with an infinity of grief and violent murderous intent, exploded like thunder. A figure as huge as a mountain, wreathed in smoke and flames, charged out of the inferno. It was Gyomei Haimjima, his sorrow and resolve now honed to a razor's edge. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage streamed from his blind eyes. In his hands, he swung his unique Nichiren weapon, a colossal spiked flail and a broad axe, connected by a long chain. He had imbued it with all his strength, all his grief, and all his will. With a terrifying scream that tore through the air, the massive flail descended like a meteorite, aimed with absolute, unhesitating precision at the head of the Demon King. Muzan's pupils contracted. He had anticipated the trap and had easily avoided it. But what he had underestimated, what he had simply disdained to calculate, was the sheer, desperate force of will a man could unleash after witnessing the sacrifice of his master. Gyomei's selfless, all-or-nothing attack contained a speed and power that even Muzan had not expected. Amidst a deafening crash, smoke and shockwaves exploded once more. The final battle between mankind and demon had begun. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 329, Chapter 329. Gyomei Haimjima's thunderous blow, fueled by an infinity of grief and a warrior's resolve, screamed through the air. The Nichiren meteor hammer, wrapped in a tremendous force that tore at the atmosphere, descended on Muzan's face like the judgment of a wrathful god. The sheer speed and power of the self-sacrificial strike surpassed anything Gyomei had ever unleashed, igniting all the sorrow and rage he felt at his master's sacrifice. Even the upper moons might have been annihilated by such an attack. But this was Muzan Kibutsuji, the undisputed Demon King. Though blindsided, Muzan's reaction was inhumanly fast. He stomped, the ground cracking beneath his feet as he shot backward like a cannonball. The roaring flail missed his head by a hair's breadth, but the hurricane of force it generated shredded the sleeve of his suit, exposing his arm. But it wasn't over. Gyomei would not waste the opportunity his master had paid for with his life. With a resolute roar, he began to spin, his flail and broad axe becoming a relentless, alternating storm of destruction that hammered down on the Demon King. Stone breathing, fourth form, volcanic rock, rapid conquest. The most destructive of all breathing techniques erupted from Gyomei's body. The ground shattered under the terrifying bombardment, the sheer force so overwhelming that even Muzan was forced to repeatedly dodge. You insect! A cold, furious snarl escaped Muzan's lips, his anger mounting at being forced onto the defensive. Finally, he stopped dodging. As Jiumei's axe swung in, Muzan raised his exposed right arm to meet it. Blood demon art, black blood spikes. Horrifyingly thick, black blood vessels bulged from his arm before erupting, unleashing a dense thicket of razor-sharp, blood-red thorns. Crash! The sound of metal on demonic flesh was deafening. A violent shockwave exploded outward, churning up the scorched earth and sending a plume of dust and smoke into the sky. So powerful, Jiumei thought, a grim solemnity on his face as he felt the incredible force transmitted back through his weapon. The speed and strength of the blood spikes were immense. He was forced to switch to a defensive posture. Stone breathing, third form, stone skin. The recoil from the clash was so strong that even Jiumei's massive arms trembled violently. Muzan's scarlet eyes looked on with cold indifference as the Hashira struggled, a cruel arc forming on his lips. Is this the full extent of the Demon Slayer Corps' strongest warrior? Truly, disappointing, Muzan taunted, beginning his psychological assault. However, if you surrender to me, I can make you the strongest of all demons. Otherwise, you will turn to ash, just like that idiot Kaguya. Dream on. Jiumei roared. We do not fear sacrifice. Humph. Another fool with a rigid mind. Then you can join your dead master in the underworld. A flash of madness lit Muzan's eyes as he prepared to overwhelm his opponent. But in that critical moment, his focus narrowed, his contempt for the Hashira before him causing a fatal lapse in his awareness. Like two venomous snakes striking from the shadows, two figures launched a silent, perfectly timed attack from impossibly unexpected angles. One was a purple blur, a butterfly of death moving so fast she was nothing but an afterimage, her entire being radiating the cold fragrance of wisteria. It was Shinobu Koko, her demonic transformation pushing her speed beyond its human limits. Breath of the insect, dance of the bee sting, true thrust. Her slender, poison-laced Nichiren blade plunged deep into Muzan's back before he could even register her presence. What? Muzan's eyes widened, but it wasn't over. An even more eerie figure materialized from thin air, a blood-stained talisman on her beautiful, hate-filled face. It was Tamayo, perfectly concealed by Yushiro's blood demon art until the last possible second. Muzan! She shrieked, a cry of centuries-old hatred. Following the path created by Shinobu's blade, she drove her own sharpened claws deep into the Demon King's body. At that moment, the ultimate payload was delivered. Shinobu's most potent wisteria concoctions and Tamayo's life's work, a multi-stage, human-reverting drug, were injected directly into Muzan's core. The timing, the angle, the sheer, suicidal determination, it was a perfect, fatal strike. For the first time in centuries, Muzan's pupils contracted in something other than anger. He felt two distinct, deadly threats attacking his very essence. Tamayo's presence, in particular, had been utterly undetectable. Muzan, you will pay for what you've done in hell. Tamayo screamed, and with a final, resolute act, she broke her own arms, leaving them embedded in his flesh to ensure the full dose was administered. As one, she and Shinobu launched themselves backward, narrowly avoiding Muzan's furious, reflexive counterattack. Gyuarg, you damned ants! An earth-shattering roar of pure agony and rage tore from Muzan's throat. His cells were spinning frantically, trying to break down the alien poisons. The toxins were splitting and corroding his body from the inside out. And Tamayo's drug, it was doing something horrifying. The blood vessels on his skin bulged and writhed like black worms. His body trembled violently as he felt a sensation he had long forgotten, disgust, and fear. His cells were being destroyed. His regeneration was slowing. And worst of all, some force was trying to pull him back, to revert him to his weak, pathetic, human form. The enraged Muzan reacted faster than thought. His back tore open, his suit shredding as dozens of fleshy whips shot out like striking vipers, lashing toward the retreating figures. Crack, crack. Though they dodged desperately, both were caught by the tips of the whips. Half of Shinobu's arm exploded into a mist of blood as she was sent flying. Tamayo was slammed to the ground, her own demonic energy flickering. But it didn't matter. They had succeeded. The poison had been delivered. Bastards! Muzan's roar shook the battlefield. I will tear each of you to pieces. Success! A flicker of grim joy ignited in Jiumei's heart. Seizing the opportunity while Muzan was stunned and reeling, he changed his posture, his Nicaran flail roaring as it smashed toward the Demon King's head once more. The balance of the final battle had been subtly, violently tilted. But Muzan Kibutsuji's tenacity and terror far exceeded anyone's imagination. The battle had only just entered its most brutal stage. 330, Chapter 330. Get away from me. With a ferocious roar, the flesh of Muzan's arm twisted and expanded, sprouting a monstrous, oversized limb that met Gyomei Haimjima's descending flail head-on. Crash! A piercing shriek of metal on bone echoed as a massive shockwave erupted, stirring up a blinding cloud of dust. The terrifying force of the impact recoiled along the chain, sending even Gyomei's mountainous body flying backward through the air. Before the dust from the blow had even settled, Muzan's cold gaze swept across the cratered battlefield. The strange, corrosive feeling of the poison in his veins was infuriating, but a cruel arc still rose on his lips. You overestimate yourselves. He would soon pay for that arrogance. The time for games was over. Muzan, you beast! A roar like that of a wounded, rabid wolf tore through the night from the east. A figure as fast as a bolt of lightning, wreathed in a visible green whirlwind, slammed into the battlefield. It was the winged Hashira, Shinazugawa Sanemi. He had been the first to arrive, just in time to witness the horrifying explosion that had consumed his master. Now, his eyes were bloodshot, the scars on his face twisting as if alive with his boundless rage. He looked like a demon of vengeance crawling out of hell itself. Wind breathing, seventh form, gale, sudden gusts. There was no preamble, no hesitation. Sanemi immediately unleashed one of his most powerful techniques. A vortex of emerald green tornado-like slashes instantly enveloped Muzan, while Sanemi himself became the eye of the storm, vowing to tear the Demon King to pieces. At the exact same moment, a second figure, as calm as a placid stream but with a turbulent, deadly undercurrent, appeared silently behind Muzan. The water Hashira, Jiyu Tomioka, had arrived. His normally stoic face was now a mask of unprecedented, cold fury. Water breathing, seventh form, drop ripple thrust. The fastest thrusting attack of the water breathing style was unleashed without a sound, aimed directly at Muzan's neck. I will not forgive you, Muzan. A voice like a roaring bonfire erupted from the south as Kyojuro Rengoku charged in, golden-red flames billowing around his resolute face, their scorching heat pushing back the demonic cold. Flame breathing, fifth form, flame tiger. A blazing tiger of pure fire roared to life, pouncing on Muzan with the intent to devour him. To do that to Oi Akita-sama. That ugliness is beyond flamboyant, and you will pay for it. Uzui Tengen made his own magnificent entrance, a sonic boom heralding his arrival as his twin blades swung out in a brilliant, deadly arc of explosive power. Sound breathing, first form, roar. Then, a purple figure fluttered in, as graceful as a butterfly but carrying an endless storm of grief. It was the flower Hashira, Kani Koko. There was no time to mourn, her eyes were filled only with an overwhelming hatred for the source of all tragedy. Flower breathing, fifth form, peonies of futility. A deadly cyclone of cherry-red petals filled the sky, each one a razor-sharp blade aimed at Muzan's vital points. Unforgivable. The snake Hashira, Iguro Obanai, and the love Hashira, Kenroji Mitsurai, arrived as one. Iguro's attack was a savage, coiling strike, as ruthless as a viper. Tears streamed from Mitsurai's eyes, yet the Nicaran blade in her hand, as flexible and powerful as a whip, had never been more resolute as it slashed to cut off Muzan's escape. In a single, breathtaking instant, 7 Hashira had descended upon the battlefield. The news of their master's sacrifice had pushed their rage and power to an absolute fever pitch. This was a war of vengeance. This was the final battle. Facing the storm of attacks, Muzan's pained, distorted face broke into a hideous, joyful smile. Hee hee, ha ha ha. He let out a low, ecstatic laugh, as if this desperate, all-out siege was exactly what he had been waiting for. Though the poisons were slowing his regeneration, his absolute power was still terrifying. Excellent timing. His crimson eyes flashed with a cruel excitement. Kaguya, you truly did prepare a grand gift for me. You used your own life to gather all of these annoying insects in one place. Kaguya's trap had also been his trap. An opportunity to wipe out the Demon Slayer Corps' strongest fighters in a single, glorious battle. Today, right here, I will eradicate your kind, completely. Muzan roared, and instead of retreating, he advanced into the heart of the storm. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of bladed whips and thorny appendages erupted from his body, dancing wildly with unprecedented speed and density. He met their offense with an indiscriminate, all-out storm of death. The battlefield became a maelstrom of color and destruction. Flames were extinguished, water was vaporized, wind was scattered, flowers were shredded, and sound was silenced. The Hashiras combined, desperate assault was met and held back by the power of one demon. Several were thrown back by the sheer force, blood trickling from the corners of their mouths. The gap in strength was still despairing. But they did not retreat. They could not. Fueled by rage and grief, they pressed the attack, and the battle instantly devolved into a brutal, intense meat grinder. Though powerful, Muzan was not invincible. The toxins were working, and under the relentless siege, he could no longer move with flawless perfection. A sharp Nicaran blade would occasionally slip past his guard, leaving a sizzling cut. The wounds healed quickly, but the simple feeling of being hurt only made him more furious. Ants! Annoying ants! Muzan roared, the speed of his whips increasing. A black lash of lightning caught Mitsurai, sending her flying. In his haste to protect her, Iguro was caught by another, a deep gash tearing open his arm. Mitsurai-san! Iguro-san! Connie cried out. Don't get distracted. Kyojuro roared, his flame blade descending on Muzan's head once more. The battle raged, a desperate stalemate held by the Hashira's numbers and their willingness to die. After another moment of pure fury, a cold calm returned to Muzan's eyes. It's time, he snarled, to end this farce. Clang! The sound was faint, almost lost in the chaos of battle, but the eruption of several new, terrifying demonic auras on the battlefield was impossible to miss. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. 331, Chapter 331. The battlefield had reached a fever pitch of intensity and ferocity. Burning with the last of their strength and the full force of their will, the Hashira swarmed the terrifying Demon King, Muzan Kibutsuji. The night air sang with the sharp hiss of Nicaran steel and the brilliant, elemental flares of their breathing techniques, a constant storm crashing against the violent dance of Muzan's black whips and bone-sharp blades. As the ancestor of all demons, Muzan's strength was unfathomable. Even while besieged, every counterattack he launched carried a deadly threat. A fresh, bloody wound had been torn across Sanemai's chest. Jiyu, who was forced to repeatedly use the 11th form, Dead Calm, to protect his comrades, was growing pale from the immense stamina drain. Kyojuro Rengoku's flames no longer burned with the same intensity they had at the start. Every Hashira now bore new scars. But their attacks were not in vain. While Muzan held the upper hand, the Hashira were the pinnacle of humanity's strength. If one sword strike failed, 2 would follow. If 2 failed, then 10. Muzan's regeneration, though terrifying, was not infinite. Under the combined assault of the potent toxins now raging through his body and the relentless, unending slashes of the Hashira, he would, sooner or later, reach his limit. Muzan knew this as well. But he was not panicked. He was prepared. Clang! The strange, resonant twang of a biwa, nearly lost in the roar of battle, suddenly echoed in everyone's minds. A cold, triumphant arc curled Muzan's lips. Tonight, the Demon Slayer core ends. The next moment, the air at multiple points around the battlefield twisted and rippled like the surface of a pond. An extremely ominous premonition washed over the Hashira, as cold as ice water. Boom! An incredibly dense and terrifying demonic aura erupted first. Space shattered like a mirror, and a tall figure in the purple robes of an ancient warrior stepped through. 6 cold, scarlet eyes surveyed the battlefield. It was Kokushibo, the Upper Moon One. His very presence seemed to freeze the air, the immense pressure of a centuries-old master swordsman putting every slayer on edge. Swish! With a pleasant chime of condensing ice, Doma, Upper Moon 2, stepped gracefully from another spatial tier amidst a shower of colorful ice flowers. His rainbow-colored eyes swept the scene, and when he saw Connie Coco with a smear of blood on her lips, his serene smile widened. Ah, the beautiful butterfly is here as well. What a fateful reunion. We can still be friends, you know. Boom! Like the beating of a war drum, a demonic presence filled with the ultimate desire for combat descended. Akaza, Upper Moon 3, his bare torso covered in the dark blue lines of his power, his body brimming with explosive force. His eyes immediately locked onto the pale-faced Jiyu Tomioka, a thrilled smile spreading across his face. Tomioka Jiyu, I can feel it. Your fighting spirit is even stronger than before. Immediately after, two more figures emerged. One was the burly, taciturn Mato, Upper Moon 4. His muscular arms were folded, his golden eyes glaring with the savage aura of a wild beast. The other, Lee, Upper Moon 5, was a ghostly, indistinct figure hidden beneath a gray robe, her presence strange and unpredictable. Finally, quietly crawling up from a shadow, came Kamuro. He made no move to join the battle, instead watching with the detached interest of a spectator appreciating a well-staged play. All the Upper Moons had arrived. And they were not alone. From the darkness surrounding the ruined Moriki Manor, hundreds of lesser demons began to emerge, their blood-red eyes glowing like embers. The battle had just become a war. This, Jiyu Tomioka said, his expression grim, is going to be difficult. No one disagreed, but not a single Hashira faltered. Their grips only tightened on their swords. Seeing their unbroken resolve, Muzan sneered and gave a single, simple command. Crush them. As the strongest of the Upper Moons, Kokushibo's 6 eyes locked onto the two he deemed the most powerful swordsmen, Gyomei Haimjima and Sanemi Shinazugawa. To have such strength at your age, he murmured, his voice a cold rasp as he slowly drew his grotesque, fleshy katana. A pity. Doma waved his golden fans, and a blizzard of ice lotuses descended upon Kani Koko and the injured Kanroji Mitsurai. Two lovely ladies. Allow me to be your opponent. Akeza laughed with pure excitement, leaping and slamming his feet into the ground, a massive snowflake-shaped shockwave erupting from the impact. A dark blue aura of pure fighting spirit soared as he shot toward Jiyu. Come, Tomioka Jiyu. Let us have a battle to the death. But Kyojuro Rengoku was already there, his blade of fire meeting Akeza's charge alongside Jiyu's stream of water. Mato and Lee, without a word, rushed towards the remaining Hashira. I'll give you a flamboyant end. Uzui Tengen roared, hurling several small, powerful gunpowder bombs that engulfed Mato in a brilliant explosion. Through the smoke, a coiling, purple blade followed with the precision of a striking snake. Hurry up and die, Iguro Obanai hissed. I need to go help Mitsurai. Elsewhere, the ghostly Lee was intercepted by another, even faster purple figure. Shinobu's violet eyes flickered with complex emotions as she faced the other demon. Without a word, their two demonic auras flared, and they rushed at each other. As the all-out war exploded, Kamuro quietly melted back into the darkness. Interesting, so very interesting, he thought. I wonder who will be the first to die. Hee. At that same moment, miles away, a pungent, chemical smell, the smell of gunpowder, suddenly hit Shinichi's nose. He raised his head. Through the trees, he could just make out the distant, dark silhouette of the Moriki Manor. The ominous premonition in his heart was now a raging certainty. 332, Chapter 332. The arrival of the Upper Moons shattered the battlefield, splintering the focused siege against Muzan into a series of brutal, one-on-one death matches. Each side now represented the absolute pinnacle of their respective camps. Once this battle began, it could only end with the utter annihilation of one or the other. The very air over the ruined Moriki Manor crackled with the collision of immense power. Gyomei Haimjima stood tall, blood trickling from his mouth from the force of Muzan's earlier blow. But as the stone Hashira, such an injury could not shake his resolve. Beside him, a human whirlwind of pure rage stood, Sanemi Shinazugawa. The two of them, one a mountain of calm resolve and the other a blade of violent fury, stood together. Their opponent, the strongest of the Upper Moons, Kokushibo. Kokushibo's 6 crimson eyes ignored the other battles, focusing solely on Gyomei and Sanemi. Centuries of swordsmanship had given him an unerring eye for true strength, and he had to admit, of all the slayers he had faced, these two were undoubtedly the strongest masters of their respective styles. As a sign of respect, he slowly drew his unique, fleshy katana from his waist. With no word or warning, he attacked. A crescent-shaped blade of condensed, dark red energy tore through the night, silent and impossibly fast. Stone breathing, 5th form, arcs of justice. Gyomei roared, slamming his colossal flail into the ground with the force of a landslide, raising a thick earthen barrier. Breath of the wind, 8th form, primary gale slash. Sanemi transformed into a spiraling drill of green wind, flanking Kokushibo while he was engaged. The dark red energy slash carved through the stone wall like it was tofu, but Gyomei had succeeded in deflecting its trajectory. In that same instant, Sanemi's attack was upon Kokushibo. The demon merely tilted his body, his blade a blur as it unleashed a series of fine, moon-shaped arcs. Moon breathing, second form, pearl flowers moon gazing. The attack perfectly parried Sanemai's assault and sent him reeling back. The air filled with the shriek of colliding steel as the three masters of combat began their deadly dance. On the southern front, Connie Coco's flower breathing was a storm of cherry-red petals, constantly clashing with the beautiful but deadly ice lotuses spawned by Doma. Beside her, Kanroji Mitsurai's breath of love was a flexible, powerful whip of pink light, her unique ribbon-like blade trying to create an opening for Connie. "Ah, the breaths of you two ladies are truly beautiful," Doma chirped, his movements graceful and composed. With a single wave of his golden fans, he unleashed a freezing current that frosted the ground. Such a shame. Even the most beautiful flowers must wither at absolute zero. His blood demon art had a vast range, the freezing air stinging Connie's lungs and frost beginning to creep up Mitsurai's arms. In the west, Kyojuro Rengoku's flame breathing was an inextinguishable blaze, his golden red slashes hammering down on Akaza. At his side, Gyutomyoka's breath of water was a relentless tide, calmly and precisely filling every gap in the fiery assault. Fire and water, hard and soft, they worked in perfect harmony. Wonderful. This is it. The fighting spirit between you two is magnificent. Akaza laughed, his body radiating pure joy as he activated his technique development, Compass Needle. His fists and feet flew like cannonballs, precisely countering their every move. The snowflake pattern under his feet expanded, enhancing his power and perception with every passing second. Flame breathing, fifth form, Flame Tiger. Water breathing, 10th form, Constant Flux. The Flame Tiger and Water Dragon crashed against Akaza's martial arts, and the battlefield shook with the force of their collision. Boom! Uzui Tenjin's sound breathing was as flamboyant as he was, his twin blades creating a symphony of explosions as he threw a volley of gunpowder bombs at Mato, Upper Moon 4. Through the fire, Iguro Obanai's coiling blade struck like a viper, aiming for the joints in the brute's armor. But Mato's fighting style was simple and terrifyingly effective, brute force. He ignored their attacks, his blood-red armor absorbing the blows as he swung his own massive blades, forcing the two Hashira into a desperate, bitter struggle. The most bizarre battle took place in the shadows. The demonic shinobu moved with incredible speed, her body exuding a cold, poisonous wisteria mist. But her opponent, the ghostly Lee, was her equal, her own gray, toxic mist clashing with hers in a silent, deadly duel. And as the war raged, in a small, unassuming wooden cabin hidden away from the fighting, a new command center was born. In the center sat an 8-year-old boy in the formal attire of the Demon Slayer Corps' master, Kiriya Yubayashiki. Though his face was pale, his gaze was remarkably steady. Before him lay a massive battlefield map, constantly being updated by Kakushi members. Stone and Wind Hashira have engaged Upper Moon 1. The situation is difficult. Flower and Love Hashira are being suppressed by Upper Moon 2's ice. Upper Moon 3 is holding off both the Flame and Water Hashira. Reports flooded in. Kiriya's hands trembled slightly, but his voice was clear as he gave his orders. Have the support teams assist the Hashira. Medical teams, prepare to treat the seriously wounded. Notify all perimeter units to follow Plan A and eliminate any lesser demons. Though young, he had prepared his entire life for this moment, to shoulder the impossible burden his father had left him. Just then, a Kakushi burst into the room, his voice filled with a new, desperate hope. Kiriya-sama. They've arrived. The Forest Hashira's team is here. Read 40 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon.
Every novel listed in the description comes with permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. You pay once, and if the novel is still ongoing, you'll receive all future updates automatically. No extra cost. Choose your novel from the description, then DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-Fi, or Patreon, you'll get instant access. Simple, secure, lifetime listening. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support means a lot.